Chapter 1. Castle of Glass. Colton Wade set down his coffee mug and admired the morning light filtering through the custom-designed bay windows of his North Carolina home. The residence, a restored colonial farmhouse nestled on 3 acres in Chapel Hill, was his masterpiece, meticulously renovated with his own hands over 5 years. As one of the Southeast's most sought-after historical restoration architects, Colton had poured his soul into creating this sanctuary for his family. "Daddy, look what I made." 5-year-old Liam came bounding into the kitchen, clutching a drawing. His dark curls, identical to Colton's, bounced with each step. Colton crouched down, meeting his son at eye level. "What have you got there, champion?" Liam thrust the paper forward proudly. "It's our house. And that's you fixing the roof, and that's Mommy in her garden. And that's me playing with Ranger." The family's golden retriever, hearing his name, thumped his tail against the hardwood floor. "This is museum-worthy," Colton declared, genuinely impressed by his son's attention to detail, a trait Liam had inherited from him. "Let's hang it right here." He secured the drawing to the refrigerator with a magnet, right beside Liam's preschool schedule and family photos. Bridget Wade entered the kitchen, her auburn hair pulled into a messy bun. Once striking and vibrant, Colton couldn't help but notice how the spark in her hazel eyes had dimmed over the past year. "Morning," she said, avoiding his gaze as she poured herself coffee. "Don't forget Liam has his pediatrician appointment at 3. "Got it covered," Colton replied. "My meeting with the Duke University Library Committee ends at 1. "Plenty of time." Bridget nodded absently. "I'll be home late tonight. Group therapy session runs until 7. Colton felt the familiar knot in his stomach tighten. Bridget's psychology practice had expanded over the past year, with evening sessions becoming increasingly frequent. As a child psychologist specializing in trauma, she claimed the extended hours were necessary for group therapy. Yet something about her explanations fell hollow. "Maggie will be here at 2, Colton said, referring to their part-time nanny. "She'll stay with Liam until I'm back." "Fine." Bridget checked her phone and frowned. "I need to go. Case consultation before my first patient." She kissed Liam's forehead, squeezed his shoulders, and whispered something in his ear that made the boy giggle. Colton watched as she gathered her things, noticing she'd changed her perfume again. The subtle floral scent she'd worn for years had been replaced by something sharper, more distinctive. Another small change in the growing constellation of differences he'd been cataloging. "Have a good day," he offered as she headed for the door. Bridget paused, her back to him. "You too," she said, voice controlled, before disappearing into the garage. The tension lingered after the door closed. Colton turned to find Liam watching him with those perceptive brown eyes. "Daddy, are you sad?" Colton forced a smile. "No, buddy. Just thinking about a building I'm fixing." He ruffled Liam's hair. "Come on, let's get you ready for school." Later that morning, Colton sat in his downtown office, surrounded by blueprints for the restoration of a 19th-century library building at Duke University. His business partner, Reuben Fisher, entered with 2 coffees. "You look like hell," Reuben said, setting a cup on Colton's desk. At 52, Reuben was 15 years Colton's senior, with salt and pepper hair and the weathered hands of someone who'd spent decades working with tools before moving to the design side. "Thanks for the assessment," Colton replied, rolling up a set of drawings. "Bridget's still working late?" Reuben asked, his tone careful. Colton nodded, not meeting his friend's eyes. 3 nights this week." "Colt, man." Reuben hesitated. "I've been married 30 years. I know the signs when something's off." "It's her work," Colton insisted, though the conviction had long left his voice. "She's building her practice. She's a child psychologist with a private practice in a university town. She's not performing emergency surgery." Reuben leaned against the desk. "Sophia saw her last weekend." Colton's head snapped up. "Where?" "At Rowan Creek Lodge. Sophia was there for her sister's birthday brunch." Reuben paused. Bridget was with a man. They looked familiar with each other. The knot in Colton's stomach twisted violently. Rowan Creek was 40 minutes away, not somewhere Bridget would casually visit. And she told him she was at a professional development seminar that weekend. Did Sophia speak to her? No. They were at a corner table. deep in conversation. Ruben's expression softened. Listen, it might be nothing. A colleague, maybe. Colton nodded mechanically, his mind already racing through the past months. The late nights, changed appearance, emotional distance, guarded phone, unexplained weekend commitments. I appreciate you telling me, he finally said. What are you going to do? Colton stared at the architectural plans before him. A building in need of restoration, its foundation threatened by hidden damage. What I always do, assess the structural integrity before deciding on a course of action. The memory of Liam's innocent question that morning echoed his mind. Daddy, are you sad? No, not sad. But for the first time in his otherwise life, Colton Wade felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. That evening, after putting Liam to bed, Colton sat alone in his home office. On his computer screen was the order confirmation for a set of discreet home security cameras. Marketed for parents wanting to monitor nannies, they would arrive tomorrow. The decision felt both necessary and sickening. In 12 years of marriage, he'd never once considered spying on Bridget. But as he scrolled through their joint calendar, noticing how her work commitments had tripled over 6 months, he couldn't ignore the architectural principle he lived by. When a visible structure shows signs of stress, examine the foundation. His phone buzzed. A text from his younger sister, Vivian. How are things? Still coming for Dad's birthday next month. Colton stared at the message. Vivian had voiced concerns about Bridget last Christmas, noting how she'd withdrawn from family conversations and spent the holiday texting. He defended his wife then, citing work stress. He texted back, all good. Yes, for Dad's birthday. How's Portland? The lie came easily, shame following close behind. He wasn't ready to voice his suspicions. Making them real would require action, and he wasn't sure what that action should be. Not when Liam's happiness hung in the balance. Bridget's car pulled into the garage just after 11. Colton closed his laptop and moved to the living room, pretending to read a book on Georgian architecture. Hey, she said, surprise evident in her voice. You're still up. Just catching up on some reading. He studied her as she set down her bag. Her cheeks were flushed, hair slightly disheveled. How was the group session? Intense. She slipped off her shoes. One patient had a breakthrough about childhood abandonment issues. That's good, right? Breakthroughs. Yes, of course. Her eyes darted around the room. Did Liam go down okay? Perfect angel. We read 3 books, and he was out by 8. Bridget smiled, the first genuine expression he'd seen from her in days. He loves his story time with you. For a moment, they existed in the warm space of shared parenthood, the one bridge that seemed unburned between them. Then Bridget's phone chimed, and she quickly silenced it without checking the screen. I'm exhausted, she said. Go in a shower and head to bed. I'll be up soon, Colton replied, though they both knew it was another ritual without substance. For months, they'd carefully orchestrated their bedtimes to avoid the intimacy of lying awake beside each other. After she disappeared upstairs, Colton sat in silence, listening to the shower running. The security cameras would arrive tomorrow. Part of him hoped they would prove Ruben and Vivian wrong, that Bridget's distance had a benign explanation, something they could work through. Another part of him, the part that had spent a career identifying structural weaknesses before catastrophic failure, knew that whatever the cameras revealed would change everything. Chapter 2, Shadows and Light. The cameras arrived in an unmarked box. 4 wireless devices no larger than golf balls, each with motion activation and night vision capability. Colton installed them while Bridget was at work. One on the living room bookshelf, another on the kitchen shelf camouflaged among cookbooks, a third in the downstairs hallway, and the last in his home office. He deliberately avoided bedrooms and bathrooms, drawing a moral line he wasn't willing to cross despite his growing suspicions. The system connected to an app on his phone, with notifications for motion-triggered recording. He justified the invasion of privacy as protection for Liam, a half-truth that let him sleep at night. 3 days passed with nothing unusual captured. Bridget's late-night arrivals continued, but the cameras only recorded her brief movements through the house before she disappeared upstairs. Colton began to question his judgment. wondering if work stress and his own insecurities had poisoned his perception of their marriage. On the fourth day, Colton attended a site meeting at the Duke Library project, then stopped by his office to review contractor bids. His phone buzzed at 2:17 p.m. with a motion alert from the living room camera. Expecting to see Maggie with Liam home from preschool, he opened the app. Instead, Bridget walked into frame, followed by a tall man with sandy hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Colton's chest tightened as he increased the volume. "Completely safe," the man was saying. "She doesn't suspect anything?" Bridget shook her head. "Colton's buried in the university project. He barely notices I'm gone." The man, handsome in an academic way, set his leather messenger bag on the coffee table. "How much time do we have?" 3 hours at least. He texted that he's running late. The stranger moved closer to Bridget, his hand brushing her hair back. 3 hours is plenty for what I have planned." Colton's vision tunneled as the man pulled Bridget into a kiss. His wife, enthusiastically returning the embrace in their home, in the very space where family photos documented their life together. "Let me show you something upstairs," Bridget said after they separated, taking the man's hand. The camera's frame emptied as they ascended the stairs, leaving Colton staring at his vacant living room while his 12-year marriage crumbled in real time. He sat motionless in his office chair, the phone white-knuckled in his grip. An involuntary sound, something between a laugh and a sob, escaped him. All the signs had been there, yet the confirmation still felt like a physical blow. "Colt," Reuben stood in the doorway, concern etched across his features. "You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." Colton looked up, disoriented. "I need to go home." "What happened?" "Bridget." He swallowed hard. "She's with someone. In our house." Understanding dawned on Reuben's face. "Jesus, Colt. I'm sorry. Liam will be home with Maggie soon." Colton stood, gathering his belongings. "I need to." He stopped, unsure what he needed to do. Confront them? Wait? Protect Liam from witnessing the implosion of his parents' marriage? Reuben placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Take a breath. Think this through. You storm in there now, with Liam about to come home, and it becomes a scene he'll never forget." The mention of Liam cleared Colton's head slightly. "You're right. I need to protect him first." He checked his watch. "Maggie will have him home in 30 minutes. Text Maggie," Reuben suggested. "Tell her to take Liam to the park or for ice cream. Buy yourself some time." Colton nodded, sending the text with trembling fingers. Maggie replied immediately, agreeing to keep Liam out until he gave the all-clear. "What's your plan?" Reuben asked. "I don't know," Colton admitted. "But I need to see who this guy is, understand what I'm dealing with." Reuben hesitated. "Want me to drive you? You shouldn't be behind the wheel right now." "No, I need to do this alone." Colton grabbed his keys. "But thanks, Rue, for everything. Call me after, whatever happens." And Colt. Reuben's expression grew serious. "Remember there's a child involved. Whatever you do next affect him most of all." Colton parked a block from his house, his contractor's truck unlikely to be noticed from inside. He approached on foot, moving silently around to the side entrance that led through the garden. Years of working on historic properties had taught him how to move through old buildings without announcing his presence. Through the kitchen window, he saw no one. The house appeared still, though a wine glass sat on the counter alongside an open bottle of the expensive Cabernet he'd bought for their anniversary, a date Bridget had claimed to forget. He entered using his key, easing the door closed behind him. From upstairs came the muffled sound of music, a jazz playlist Bridget only used when she was in the bath. On the kitchen island lay an unfamiliar leather messenger bag. Colton hesitated only briefly before checking its contents. Inside were papers bearing the letterhead Hawthorne Neuropsychology Associates, a business card for Dr. Wesley Hawthorne, Ph.D., and a folder labeled Cognitive Reconditioning Protocols. A neuropsychologist. The pieces clicked into place. Bridget had mentioned consulting with a specialist on difficult cases months ago. What had begun as professional had clearly evolved. Colton photographed the documents with his phone, then carefully replaced everything. In the living room, he noticed discarded shoes by the couch, expensive leather Oxfords in a size much larger than his own. The urge to confront them immediately burned his chest, but Ruben's warning echoed. Remember, there's a child involved. A confrontation now would be emotionally satisfying, but strategically disastrous. Instead, Colton retreated silently, exiting the way he came. In his truck, he sent Maggie another text asking her to bring Liam to Ruben's house instead. Then he called his sister. "Viv, I need your legal advice," he said when she answered. As an attorney specializing in family law, Vivian was his best resource for what came next. "What's wrong?" she asked, immediately sensing the tension in his voice. "Bridget's having an affair. I have video evidence and just confirmed it in person." The words felt surreal as he spoke them. Vivian was silent for a moment. "Are you sure you want my lawyer advice and not my sister advice right now?" "Both, but the lawyer first." "Okay." Her voice shifted to its professional cadence. "Document everything. Times, dates, any evidence. North Carolina is still a state where adultery matters in divorce proceedings. Don't confront her until you've consulted a divorce attorney, which should happen immediately. And whatever you do, don't leave the house. Abandonment claims can complicate custody arrangements." Custody. The word hit him like a physical blow. "Liam." "Exactly." Vivian's tone softened. "Now, as your sister, I'm so sorry, Colt. What do you need right now?" Colton watched a couple walking hand in hand down the sidewalk, their ordinary happiness suddenly alien to him. "I need to protect my son. Then that's what we focus on. One step at a time." Vivian paused. "Where's Liam now?" "With Maggie. I'm having her take him to Ruben's." "Good. That gives you time to think before you talk to Bridget." Another pause. "Colt, this is important. When you do confront her, record the conversation. North Carolina is a one-party consent state." The methodical, evidence-gathering approach steadied him. This was like assessing a damaged building. Document, analyze, plan the restoration. Except there would be no restoration here. Only demolition and rebuilding. "I should go," he finally said. "I need to get to Ruben's before Liam starts asking questions." "Call me anytime, day or night," Vivian said. "And Colt, you and Liam will get through this." As he drove to Ruben's house, Colton's mind cleared. The initial shock had been replaced by cold resolve. Whatever happened next, he would protect Liam at all costs. He checked the camera app one last time before pulling into Ruben's driveway. The living room feed showed Bridget and Dr. Hawthorne, fully dressed now, examining one of Colton's restoration sketches on the wall. Their casual intimacy in his space, discussing his work, sent a new wave of anger through him. "Your husband is talented," Hawthorne remarked, his refined voice carrying clearly through the app. "He restores things," Bridget replied dismissively. "Old, broken things. That's his specialty." Hawthorne laughed, pulling her close. "And what's your specialty, Dr. Wade?" She smiled up at him, a smile Colton hadn't seen directed at him in over a year. "Reshaping minds, of course, especially the young, impressionable ones." Something in her tone sent a chill down Colton's spine that had nothing to do with the affair. There was a clinical detachment in her voice when she spoke about young minds, the very vulnerable children she treated in her practice. As he turned off the app and exited his truck, Colton realized that discovering the affair might be just the beginning of what he needed to uncover. Chapter 3. Fault Lines. "Daddy." Liam launched himself into Colton's arms the moment he entered Ruben's living room. "Miss Maggie brought me here. We had ice cream, and Mr. Ruben has Legos." Colton lifted his son, inhaling the familiar scent of watermelon shampoo and playground dust. "That sounds amazing, buddy." Maggie approached with concern evident in her expression. In her mid-60s with silver-streaked black hair, she'd been with them since Liam was an infant. "Everything okay, Mr. Wade?" Your text seemed urgent. "Just a situation at home I needed to handle," Colton replied, keeping his voice light for Liam's benefit. "Thank you for being flexible." "Of course." Her eyes held questions she was too professional to ask. "Should I take Liam home now?" "Actually," Sophia Fisher said, entering from the kitchen, "we were hoping Liam might stay for dinner. Ruben's firing up the grill, and I made those chocolate chip cookies he loves." Liam squirmed excitedly in Colton's arms. "Can I, Daddy? Please." The child's enthusiasm provided cover for what Colton recognized as Sophia's tactful intervention. She and Reuben were offering sanctuary while he dealt with the implosion of his marriage. "That would be great, actually," Colton said. To Maggie, he added, "You can head home. I'll take it from here." After settling financial matters with Maggie, Colton joined Sophia in the kitchen while Liam and Reuben built an elaborate Lego civilization in the den. "Reuben told me," Sophia said simply, setting a mug of coffee before him. "I'm so sorry, Colton." He wrapped his hands around the mug, grateful for something to ground him. "I need to confront her tonight." "I can't." His voice caught. "I can't sleep under the same roof, knowing what I know." "What's your plan for Liam?" The question pierced through his anger. He hadn't thought beyond the confrontation. "Could he stay here tonight?" Colton asked. "I don't want him witnessing whatever happens." "Of course," Sophia said without hesitation. "He can have Ellie's room. She's at college anyway." Relief washed over him. "Thank you. I don't know how to—" "You don't need to thank us," Sophia interrupted gently. "Family doesn't keep score." The simple kindness nearly broke him. He looked away, blinking rapidly. "I should call Bridget. Let her know Liam's staying here tonight." Sophia nodded. "Use Reuben's office if you want privacy." In the small home office, Colton dialed Bridget's number, steeling himself to sound normal. "Hey," she answered, slightly breathless. "Everything okay?" "Fine," he replied, his free hand clenched into a fist. "Liam's having dinner with Reuben and Sophia. They've invited him for a sleepover with movie night. He's pretty excited." "Oh," she sounded momentarily thrown. "That's very spontaneous. You know Liam and his Lego sessions with Reuben. They've got some massive construction project happening." "Right." Her recovery was quick. "Well, that's fine. I have notes to catch up on anyway." "Is that what you're calling him now?" Colton bit back the bitter retort. "I'll be home around 7. We should talk." A beat of silence. "About what?" "Just some things that have been on my mind. Nothing urgent." Another pause. "Okay. See you then." He ended the call and checked the camera app again. The house was empty, Hawthorne evidently gone. But now he had a name, a face, and a connection to pursue. Opening his laptop, Colton searched for Dr. Wesley Hawthorne. The results painted a picture of a rising star in neuropsychology. Articles in prestigious journals, a faculty position at UNC's medical school, and a private practice specializing in cognitive reconditioning protocols for trauma patients. What caught Colton's attention, however, was a small news item from 3 years earlier. Hawthorne had been investigated by the state licensing board after a patient's family complained about experimental techniques. The complaint was dismissed for insufficient evidence, but the incident had prompted Hawthorne's departure from his previous position at a prominent Atlanta hospital. Colton dug deeper, finding Hawthorne's dissertation titled Malleable Memory, Reconditioning Traumatic Recall in Developing Minds. The academic language was dense, but the implications disturbing. Hawthorne had researched methods to effectively rewrite traumatic memories in children. A sickening possibility formed in Colton's mind. Bridget, a child psychologist with access to vulnerable patients, and Hawthorne, a neuropsychologist researching memory manipulation in children. Their professional overlap wasn't coincidental. It was foundational to whatever connected them. By the time he returned to the kitchen, Colton had formulated a clearer picture of what he was facing. "Sophia, do you mind if I borrow one of Reuben's recorders?" he asked. "The ones he uses for job site notes." Sophia studied him carefully. "Planning to document your conversation?" Vivian's advice. One-party consent state. She nodded and disappeared into Reuben's workshop, returning with a small digital recorder. "Fully charged. Just press the red button to start." Colton pocketed the device. "Thank you. For everything." "Just—" Sophia hesitated. "Be careful, Colton. I've known Bridget almost as long as you have, and I've always sensed something calculated beneath the surface." Her observation aligned uncomfortably with his own recent revelations. "I'll watch my step." He spent a few more minutes with Liam, explaining that he had grown-up things to do tonight, but would see him for breakfast. Liam, enchanted by the prospect of a sleepover, accepted the explanation easily. "Love you to the moon, buddy," Colton said, their familiar farewell. And back again, Liam completed, throwing his arms around his father's neck. The house was quiet when Colton arrived home. Bridget sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, a glass of wine, his anniversary Cabernet, beside her. She wore a casual outfit different from what he'd seen in the camera footage earlier. "Hi," she said, smiling with practiced warmth. "How was your day?" Colton activated the recorder in his pocket before responding. "Educational." "Oh." She closed her laptop, giving him her full attention, a gesture that once would have pleased him, but now struck him as performative. "I learned some interesting things about cognitive reconditioning." He watched her face carefully. Fascinating field. The slight widening of her eyes was all the confirmation he needed. "What brought that up?" she asked, voice perfectly controlled. "Professional curiosity. I'm always interested in how people rebuild things." He moved to pour himself a drink, maintaining a calm he didn't feel. "Speaking of which, how's Dr. Hawthorne these days?" The wine glass froze halfway to her lips. "Wesley? We've consulted on a few cases." "What?" "Just curious about the consultation that happened in our bedroom this afternoon." The glass descended slowly to the counter. "You had me follow?" "Didn't need to. Our house has security cameras now." He pulled out his phone and played a clip from earlier, Bridget leading Hawthorne upstairs. "Installed them to keep an eye on Liam when I'm not home." Caught some unexpected footage instead. Bridget's expression shifted from shock to calculation. "Colton, I can explain." "Don't bother." He cut her off. "I'm not interested in explanations for the affair. What concerns me is what you and Hawthorne are doing professionally." Confusion flickered across her face. "What are you talking about?" "Cognitive reconditioning protocols. Malleable memory in developing minds." He watched comprehension dawn in her eyes. "What exactly are you two doing with your patients, Bridget?" Her posture straightened, a subtle transformation occurring. The pretense of the caught spouse vanished, replaced by something colder and more controlled. "You wouldn't understand. Traditional therapy is painfully inefficient. Wesley's protocols can reprocess traumatic memories in weeks instead of years. By manipulating children's perceptions of events," Colton said flatly, "rewriting their memories. By reshaping harmful narratives," she corrected. "The children we work with have experienced genuine trauma. We help them process it more effectively." Is that what the licensing board investigation in Atlanta was about? A flash of irritation crossed her features. A misunderstanding by conservative practitioners threatened by innovation. And us? Was our marriage just another experiment? "Don't be dramatic." She sighed as if dealing with an unreasonable child. "Our marriage has been functionally over for a year. You're so obsessed with your buildings, you barely noticed me withdrawing." "I noticed. I just misdiagnosed the cause." Colton leaned against the counter. "So what happens now?" Bridget straightened, smoothing her expression into something almost sympathetic. "We divorce, obviously. I'll file for primary custody of Liam. My schedule is more flexible than yours, and courts favor maternal custody, especially for young children." The calculated response chilled him. "And your relationship with Hawthorne?" "Wesley and I will continue our research and eventually formalize our personal relationship." She spoke of someone outlining a business plan. "It will be best for everyone if you don't contest the custody arrangement. Given your family history, questions about your stability could arise." Colton stiffened. His father's struggles with depression after military service were private family matters. "Are you threatening me?" "Of course not. I'm outlining the most rational path forward." She took a deliberate sip of wine. "We're both professionals, Colton. This doesn't need to become messy." "What about Liam? Have you and Hawthorne been experimenting with your protocols on our son?" For the first time, Bridget appeared genuinely offended. "I would never experiment on Liam. I'm preparing him for the transition. That's all. Children need clear narratives during divorce." "What kind of narratives?" "Age-appropriate ones. That sometimes parents live separately. That change can be positive." Something about her clinical detachment triggered Colton's architectural instinct for structural weakness. "Is that all you've been telling him?" Bridget's gaze slid away briefly. "Of course." The lie hung between them, palpable. Colton recalled Bridget whispering in Liam's ear that morning, The boy's strange questions about whether Daddy was sad, his increasing reluctance during bedtime routines they'd once cherished. "I want full disclosure of any preparation you've done with Liam," he said, voice hardening. "And I want it now. Don't take that tone with me." Bridget stood, abandoning the conciliatory approach. "You're in no position to make demands. I'm Liam's mother and a child psychology expert. No court will question my judgment regarding his emotional well-being. And no ethics board will support manipulating a child's perception of their parent," Colton countered, "especially using experimental techniques under investigation in another state." Her eyes narrowed. "Be very careful about allegations you can't prove, Colton." "I don't need to prove them yet. I just need reasonable suspicion to request psychological evaluation during custody proceedings." It was a bluff, but one that struck home. Bridget's composure fractured momentarily. "You're making this unnecessarily adversarial." "No, you created the adversarial situation when you decided to use our son as a pawn." Colton straightened, steadied by righteous anger. "I want divorce papers drawn up that include joint custody, full psychological evaluation of Liam by an independent specialist, and complete disclosure of any narrative preparation you've conducted." "Or what?" The pretense had vanished entirely now. "I go public with Hawthorne's techniques. I contact his former patients in Atlanta. I file ethics complaints against both of you." Each threat was improvised, but Colton delivered them with the conviction of a man laying foundation stones. Bridget studied him, reassessing. "I didn't think you had this in you," she finally said, almost appreciatively. "You underestimated what I'd do to protect my son." "Apparently." She picked up her wine glass, considering. "I'll need to consult with Wesley before agreeing to anything." "Of course you will," Colton replied coldly. "In the meantime, I'll be sleeping in the guest room, and Liam will remain with Ruben and Sophia until we have a formal agreement in place." "You can't keep my son from me," Bridget snapped. "I'm not. I'm keeping him from being psychologically manipulated during a family crisis." Colton moved toward the door. "We'll talk tomorrow after you've consulted your colleague." As he climbed the stairs to gather overnight essentials, Colton felt a strange calm descend. The confrontation had revealed Bridget's true nature more clearly than any infidelity. Whatever happened next, he understood his adversary and the stakes involved. In the guest room, he stopped the recorder and emailed the audio file to both Vivian and himself. Then he texted his sister, "Need a family law specialist recommendation. Situation more complicated than standard infidelity. Concerns about psychological manipulation of Liam." Her response came quickly. "Call Palmer Donovan first thing tomorrow. Best in child custody cases. Sending contact info. Stay strong." Colton packed a small bag, listening to Bridget's hushed phone conversation downstairs. The familiar home felt like a battleground now, with Liam caught in the crossfire. As he prepared for what would undoubtedly be a sleepless night, Colton made a silent promise to his son. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, he would protect Liam from becoming a casualty of Bridget's manipulation and from the mysterious protocols she and Hawthorne were developing. The war had just begun, and he intended to win it. Chapter 4. Behind the Curtain. Palmer Donovan's law office occupied the top floor of a renovated textile mill in Durham. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline, while exposed brick walls and restored timber beams spoke to Colton's appreciation for historical preservation. "Impressive space," he commented as Donovan led him to a conference room. "I believe in repurposing what's valuable," Donovan replied. In her mid-50s with short silver hair and penetrating gray eyes, she carried herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to navigating human wreckage. "Much like your architectural work." They settled at a mahogany table where Vivian already waited. Having flown in from Portland the previous night, she'd insisted on accompanying Colton to this critical meeting. "I've reviewed the materials you sent," Donovan began, including the recorded conversation and camera footage. "First, let me say you were smart to document everything." She tapped a leather portfolio. "North Carolina still considers adultery relevant in divorce proceedings, which gives us leverage." "My primary concern is Liam," Colton interjected. The affair is secondary to what I believe Bridget and Hawthorne might be doing. Donovan nodded. That's where things get complicated. Your suspicions about psychological manipulation are concerning, but difficult to prove without evidence. What kind of evidence would be needed? Vivian asked. Ideally, documentation of their methods or testimony from other affected patients. Donovan turned to Colton. You mentioned Hawthorne was investigated in Atlanta? Yes, but the case was dismissed. I've been trying to contact the family who filed the complaint, but so far, no response. Keep trying, Donovan advised. Meanwhile, we need to secure temporary custody arrangements that protect Liam while we investigate further. Colton leaned forward. Bridget texted this morning. She's agreed to mediation and wants Liam home immediately. Of course she does, Donovan said dryly. She's realized her position is weaker than she initially calculated. But we're not rushing anything. She opened her portfolio. Here's what I propose. We file for emergency temporary custody based on concerns about psychological well-being. We request independent psychological evaluation of Liam by a court-appointed specialist. Not anyone connected to UNC where Hawthorne has influence. Won't that traumatize Liam further? Colton asked, anxiety edging his voice. A skilled child psychologist can evaluate without causing distress, Donovan assured him. The goal is to establish whether inappropriate influence has occurred. And if it has, Vivian pressed. Donovan's expression hardened. Then we don't just win custody. We potentially pursue criminal charges for child psychological abuse and professional misconduct. The severity of the situation settled over the room. What about Liam in the meantime? Colton asked. He's been with Ruben and Sophia for 2 nights, but that's not sustainable. I suggest a structured visitation schedule, Donovan replied. Liam stays primarily with you, with supervised visits with Bridget, supervised meaning a neutral third party present, not Hawthorne. Colton nodded slowly. She won't agree easily. She doesn't have to agree. That's what emergency orders are for. Donovan gathered her papers. I'll file today. Be prepared for Bridget to retaliate with counterclaims. What kind of counterclaims? Given your conversation, likely allegations about your mental stability or parenting capability. Donovan's gaze was direct. Is there anything in your history she could weaponize? Any incidents, therapy, medication? Colton exchanged glances with Vivian. My father struggled with PTSD after his military service. There were difficult periods during my childhood. Nothing abusive, but Bridget knows the details. And she'll twist them, Vivian added grimly. Then we preempt her, Donovan decided. We acknowledge your family history openly and demonstrate how it's informed your commitment to Liam's well-being. The narrative becomes concerned father protecting son rather than whatever version she's constructing. As the meeting concluded, Donovan walked them to the elevator. One more thing, Mr. Wade. From now on, document every interaction with Bridget. Text messages, emails, recorded conversations where legal. Create a contemporaneous journal of Liam's behavior and statements. We're building a case brick by brick. The architectural metaphor wasn't lost on Colton. I understand. And prepare yourself, Donovan added as the elevator doors opened. This will get worse before it gets better. The prediction proved accurate sooner than expected. When Colton returned home to collect more clothes and Liam's favorite toys, he found the locks changed and a sheriff's deputy waiting. Mr. Wade, the deputy approached as Colton tried his key in the front door. I have temporary restraining orders to serve you. Colton accepted the papers with numb fingers as the deputy explained. Bridget had filed emergency orders claiming threatening behavior and fear for her safety, citing Colton's invasion of privacy with surveillance cameras and aggressive confrontation about her alleged affair. This is absurd, Colton said, scanning the documents. I installed those cameras to monitor our son while I was working. Just doing my job, sir, the deputy replied neutrally. The order requires you to maintain 500 feet distance from driveway and this residence until the hearing date. He pointed to a line in the paperwork. That's next Monday at 9 a.m. 5 days. Colton had been legally barred from his own home and from Liam for 5 days. As the deputy departed, Colton called Donovan. She's preempted us, he said when she answered. Restraining order claiming I'm threatening and dangerous. Exactly as I predicted, Donovan replied, frustration evident in her voice. She's establishing a narrative of you as unstable and threatening, while positioning herself as the protective parent. What do I do now? I can't even get Liam's things. First, comply absolutely with the order. Give her no ammunition. Donovan's voice sharpened. Second, we file our emergency motion immediately with the new information that she's weaponizing the legal system to separate you from your son without evidence of actual danger. And Liam? He's in there with her. A pause. That's the hardest part, Mr. Wade. For the next 5 days, we have to trust that she won't harm her own son. If she's as calculating as she appears, she knows harming Liam works against her interests. The cold logic offered little comfort as Colton returned to his truck, legally banished from his home and son. He called Vivian next, his voice breaking as he explained the situation. I'm coming to get you, she said immediately. You're not facing this alone. Later that evening, in Ruben's guest room, Colton sat surrounded by his sister, Ruben, and Sophia as they plotted strategy. We need to understand what Bridget and Hawthorne are really doing, Vivian insisted. Their research is key to all of this. I've been digging, Colton said, opening his laptop. Hawthorne's published work focuses on memory reconsolidation in trauma patients. The idea is that when traumatic memories are recalled, they briefly become malleable before being stored again. His techniques involve activating those memories, then introducing new information to change how they're restored. That sounds manipulative, Sophia commented. It's controversial, Colton agreed. Some psychologists consider it cutting-edge treatment for PTSD. Others see it as potential brainwashing. And Bridget's role? Ruben asked. Her specialty is childhood trauma intervention. Together, they're apparently developing protocols for children specifically. Colton rubbed his eyes. What terrifies me is thinking about what narrative they might be implanting in Liam. The room fell silent, the implications hanging heavy in the air. We need access to their research, Vivian finally said. Their papers, clinical notes, patient records, anything that shows what they're doing and whether they've applied it to Liam. That's all privileged information, Colton pointed out, protected by doctor-patient confidentiality and intellectual property laws. Unless, Ruben started, then hesitated. Unless what? Colton prompted. Unless someone reported suspected abuse to the licensing board. Ruben glanced at Sophia, who nodded encouragement. That would trigger an investigation that could compel disclosure of methods. Vivian straightened. He's right. As an attorney, I could file an ethics complaint based on reasonable suspicion of inappropriate experimental techniques being used on minors without proper consent. Including Liam? Colton asked. Especially Liam, Vivian confirmed. But we need something more substantial than suspicion. Colton considered this, then remembered something. The nanny cams. I only removed the one from the living room when I collected them. The others are still in place, still recording to cloud storage. Can you access that footage remotely? Vivian asked. Yes, from my phone or laptop. Then we might get the evidence we need, she said, if Bridget brings Liam home. And if she discusses her preparation techniques with Hawthorne there, Colton finished, hope kindling for the first time since receiving the restraining order. Meanwhile, Sophia interjected, we should prepare for Monday's hearing. Character witnesses, evidence of your relationship with Liam, anything that counters the narrative that you're dangerous. I've got hours of job site videos where Liam visits, Ruben offered. Shows what a careful, attentive father you are. Colton nodded gratefully, overwhelmed by their support. As the strategy session continued, he periodically checked the camera app, watching for any activity in his empty house. Around 9, motion activated the kitchen camera. Bridget entered with Hawthorne, who carried a sleeping Liam. The boy's head rested on Hawthorne's shoulder, his small body limp with exhaustion. I'll put him down, Hawthorne said, his voice faint but audible. Then we can continue our discussion. Bridget nodded, watching them ascend the stairs with a satisfied expression. The casual intimacy between Hawthorne and Liam sent a surge of rage through Colton. The man was already assuming a paternal role, carrying Colton's son to bed in Colton's house. "They've brought Liam home," he announced tightly. "Hawthorne's putting him to bed." The others exchanged concerned glances. "Keep watching," Vivian advised. "But prepare yourself for what you might see." 20 minutes later, Hawthorne returned to the kitchen where Bridget had opened a bottle of wine. They spoke in low voices, but the camera's sensitive microphone captured enough. "Went better than expected," Bridget was saying. "Judge Lambert has a history of siding with psychological professionals in custody cases." "And the temporary order?" Hawthorne asked, accepting a glass. "Should hold until the hearing. By then, we'll have had 5 uninterrupted days with Liam." Hawthorne nodded thoughtfully. "Enough time for initial conditioning, but we need to be subtle. Children his age are suggestible but inconsistent." Bridget sipped her wine. "I've been laying groundwork for months, Wes. Small comments about Daddy's angry moments, his absences, how sometimes he makes Mommy cry. All technically true, just recontextualized," Hawthorne said with professional appreciation. "You've been very thorough. I learned from the best." She smiled at him over her glass. With the right preparation, children can develop vivid memories of events that never occurred. By Monday, Liam will genuinely believe his father has frightened him on multiple occasions. And if directly questioned, "We'll use indirect narrative building tonight and tomorrow," Bridget replied. "Then stronger associative techniques Thursday and Friday. By Saturday, we can introduce specific scenario implantation." Hawthorne nodded. "Similar to the Peterson case." "Exactly. That 5-year-old provided perfect courtroom testimony about abuse that never happened." Bridget leaned forward. "By Monday, Liam will be prepared to tell the judge that Daddy scares him. That Daddy is a dangerous man." The word struck Colton like physical blows. His wife, his son's mother, was methodically planning to implant false memories of fear and abuse. Not just as a vindictive ex-spouse, but as a calculating psychological professional applying experimental techniques on their child. "My God," Sophia whispered beside him, hand covering her mouth. Vivian was already on her phone, dialing Donovan. "We need to record this and get it to the judge immediately," she said. "This is textbook psychological abuse." But Colton barely heard them. On screen, Bridget and Hawthorne continued discussing their conditioning schedule for Liam of scientists discussing a lab specimen. His son, his bright, loving boy, reduced to an experimental subject in their custody strategy. As Vivian coordinated with Donovan and Ruben figured out how to save the video feed, Colton sat motionless, a terrible clarity descending. This wasn't just about custody or infidelity anymore. This was about protecting Liam from psychological harm that could reshape his entire childhood and his relationship with his father forever. Whatever came next, Colton knew with absolute certainty. He would not allow them 5 uninterrupted days with his son. Chapter 5, Intervention. The emergency hearing convened at 8 a.m. Thursday in Judge Eleanor Hargrove's chambers rather than open court, a small mercy for which Colton was grateful. Wearing his only suit and accompanied by Donovan, he entered the judge's chambers feeling like a man marching to execution. Judge Hargrove, a stern woman in her 60s with reading glasses perched on her nose, watched them take seats across from Bridget and her attorney, a sharp-featured man named Lawrence Collins. Hawthorne was notably absent. "This is highly irregular," Judge Hargrove began, but the evidence submitted warrants immediate attention. She tapped the folder before her. "I've reviewed the video recording provided by Mr. Wade, along with the counter-evidence from Dr. Wade's restraining order petition." Collins leaned forward. "Your Honor, the video was obtained illegally through surveillance devices installed without my client's knowledge." "The cameras were installed legally in common areas of the family home," Donovan interjected. "North Carolina, law permits such recording by a homeowner." "Regardless," Judge Hargrove cut in, "the content of the recording raises serious concerns about the psychological welfare of the minor child." She turned to Bridget. "Dr. Wade, in this recording, you discuss implementing conditioning techniques and memory implantation on your 5-year-old son. Can you explain these statements?" Bridget maintained perfect composure. "Your Honor, Those terms were taken out of context. Dr. Hawthorne and I were discussing theoretical applications of trauma narrative therapy, using professional terminology that sounds concerning to lay people. You specifically mentioned making your son believe his father had frightened him on multiple occasions, Judge Hargrove noted, and referenced scenario implantation comparable to a Peterson case where false testimony was secured. A flicker of unease crossed Bridget's face. Again, Your Honor, professional shorthand in a theoretical discussion. Dr. Wade has an exemplary record treating traumatized children, Collins added. Her methods are sophisticated but entirely ethical. Judge Hargrove removed her glasses. I've been on the family court bench for 22 years, Mr. Collins. I've seen parents weaponize everything from religion to food allergies in custody battles. But I have never encountered a parent discussing deliberate psychological manipulation of a child to secure favorable testimony. She replaced her glasses. It raises exceptional concerns. Colton felt a surge of cautious hope at the judge's tone. Given these concerns, Judge Hargrove continued, I'm ordering immediate protective measures. First, the temporary restraining order against Mr. Wade is dissolved. Second, temporary physical custody of Liam Wade is awarded to Mr. Wade, with supervised visitation for Dr. Wade, pending full psychological evaluation of the child by court-appointed experts. Bridget sat perfectly still, only her whitening knuckles betraying her reaction. Third, the judge added, I'm ordering Dr. Wade and Dr. Wesley Hawthorne to cease all psychological interventions with the child immediately. Fourth, I'm referring this matter to the North Carolina Psychology Board for investigation of potential ethics violations. Collins began to protest, but Judge Hargrove raised her hand. My decision is not final, counselor. A full hearing will be scheduled in 2 weeks. But given the evidence, I cannot in good conscience leave a child in an environment where psychological manipulation appears to be occurring. She signed the order and handed copies to both attorneys. Mr. Wade, you may retrieve your son immediately, accompanied by the court officer I've assigned. Dr. Wade, you will have supervised visitation twice weekly until the full hearing. This is outrageous. Bridget finally spoke, her careful composure cracking. My husband has manipulated this court with selective recordings and... Dr. Wade, Judge Hargrove interrupted sharply. I strongly advise you not to continue that statement. This court takes child welfare paramount above parental rights. Your professional credentials make your recorded statements more concerning, not less. The chambers fell silent. Court Officer Rivera will accompany Mr. Wade to retrieve the child, Judge Hargrove concluded. This session is adjourned until the full hearing on June 12th. Outside the chambers, Donovan gripped Colton's shoulder. This is the best possible outcome at this stage. Judge Hargrove is highly respected. Her temporary order will carry significant weight in the full hearing. Colton nodded, still processing the sudden reversal of fortune. What happens now? Officer Rivera will accompany you to collect Liam. Bridget is legally required to comply without interference. Donovan checked her watch. The psychology board notification goes out immediately, which means Bridget and Hawthorne will be focused on defending their professional licenses. And Liam? How do I help him through this? Donovan's expression softened. The court will assign a child psychologist specializing in custody cases, someone with no connection to either Bridget or Hawthorne. That specialist will assess whether any manipulation has occurred and help Liam process everything appropriately. In the meantime, be the stable, loving father he knows. Don't question him about what Bridget may have told him. Don't speak negatively about his mother. Just provide security and consistency. Donovan glanced toward Officer Rivera, who waited by the elevator. Ready. Colton straightened his tie and nodded. Ready. The drive to his home felt surreal. Officer Rivera, a compassionate woman in her 40s, followed in a separate vehicle, giving Colton space to prepare himself. He hadn't seen Liam in 3 days and had no idea what conditioning Bridget might have already implemented. As they pulled into the driveway, Colton noticed Hawthorne's car parked on the street, a deliberate provocation that Officer Rivera noted with a frown. Remember, she advised as they approached the door. Remain calm regardless of provocation. This is about Liam's well-being, not winning against your wife. Colton nodded, steeling himself as Rivera rang the doorbell. Bridget answered immediately, as if she'd been waiting. Her expression was glacial, professional mask firmly in place. Officer Rivera, I was informed you'd be coming. Dr. Wade, Rivera replied formally. I have a court order for temporary custody transfer to Mr. Wade. She presented the paperwork. Please have Liam ready to leave with his father within 30 minutes. Liam is upset by this sudden change, Bridget stated, not acknowledging Colton's presence. As his mother and a child psychologist, I strongly advise against traumatizing him further with an abrupt transition. The court order accounts for appropriate transition time, Rivera replied evenly. We can wait while you help Liam prepare. Bridget's jaw tightened before she stepped aside, allowing them to enter. In the living room, Hawthorne sat with Liam, building a Lego structure. The domestic scene, another man engaging in an activity that had always been Colton's special connection with his son, sent a wave of anger through him that he carefully suppressed. Daddy! Liam looked up, his expression cycling rapidly from surprise to happiness to confusion. He glanced uncertainly at Hawthorne, as if seeking permission. Colton crouched down. Hey, buddy, I've missed you so much. Liam hesitated, then ran to him, throwing small arms around his neck. Where did you go? The innocent question broke Colton's heart. I had to take care of some grown-up things, but I'm here now. In fact, you're going to come stay with me for a while. Liam pulled back, brow furrowed. But Mommy said you were busy with your buildings. Never too busy for you, Colton assured him, acutely aware of Bridget and Hawthorne watching. Dr. Hawthorne needs to leave during this transition, Officer Rivera stated firmly. Hawthorne stood, straightening his glasses. Of course, I was just leaving. To Liam, he added, we'll finish our project another time, buddy. The casual endearment made Colton's teeth clench, but he maintained his focus on Liam. Why don't we pack some of your favorite things to bring with us? As Hawthorne departed with a significant look at Bridget, Colton led Liam upstairs to his bedroom, grateful for the moment alone with his son. Are you and Mommy fighting? Liam asked as they collected clothing and toys. Colton chose his words carefully. Mommy and I are having some disagreements about grown-up things, but we both love you very, very much. Liam nodded solemnly, processing this in his 5-year-old way. Mommy said you get very angry sometimes. The statement, so innocuous yet clearly part of Bridget's conditioning, sent a chill through Colton. Everyone feels angry sometimes, buddy, but I always try to talk about my feelings calmly. She said you might scare me. Colton stopped packing, turning to face his son fully. Liam, listen to me. I would never, ever want to scare you. You're the most important person in my life. Liam studied him with unnerving intensity. Dr. West said sometimes people don't remember being scary. The deliberate implantation was becoming clear. Colton fought to keep his expression neutral while rage burned in his chest. That sounds confusing. How about this? If you ever feel scared, for any reason, you can always tell me, and I'll listen very carefully. This seemed to satisfy Liam, who returned to selecting toys for his backpack. Colton continued packing essentials, mentally cataloging each concerning statement for later reporting to Donovan and the court-appointed psychologist. Downstairs, Bridget waited with a small suitcase. I've packed his medications, daily schedule, and favorite pajamas, she said to Officer Rivera, still not acknowledging Colton directly. Medications? Colton questioned. Liam isn't on any medications. Dr. Hawthorne prescribed a mild anxiety supplement after Liam began having nightmares. Bridget replied coolly. It's perfectly safe. Officer Rivera intervened. Any medications will need to be reviewed by the court-appointed physician before administration. She took the bottle Bridget reluctantly produced and placed it in an evidence bag. I'll have this analyzed as part of the court order. The implications were staggering. Had they actually begun medicating Liam as part of their manipulation? The thought made Colton physically ill. Time to say goodbye to Mommy for now, Officer Rivera prompted gently. Liam looked uncertainly between his parents. Bridget crouched down, her entire demeanor transforming as she embraced him. "Be good for Daddy," she said, voice wavering perfectly. "Remember everything we talked about. Mommy will see you very soon." The performance was flawless, the concerned mother hiding her pain for her child's benefit. Only Colton recognized the calculated messaging beneath her words. "Remember what we conditioned you to believe." "I love you, Mommy," Liam said, clinging briefly before Colton guided him toward the door. Outside, Officer Rivera helped secure Liam in his car seat, while Colton loaded the bags. As they prepared to leave, Bridget appeared on the porch, her expression no longer maternal, but coldly determined. "This isn't over, Colton," she called, voice carrying just enough for him to hear without reaching Liam. "You have no idea what you're up against." Colton met her gaze steadily. "Neither do you." He got into his truck and drove away with his son, the rearview mirror capturing Bridget's diminishing figure on the porch of what had once been their family home. The following days established a new routine. Colton took emergency leave from work, focusing entirely on creating stability for Liam. They stayed in Ruben's guest cottage, neutral territory where Liam could adjust without the emotional complications of either family home. Dr. Eliza Washington, the court-appointed child psychologist, began gentle evaluation sessions with Liam, while keeping Colton informed of her observations without breaching therapeutic confidentiality. "He's showing signs of confusion about reality versus suggested narrative," she explained during their third consultation. "Some statements he makes about you don't align with his emotional responses to you. It's consistent with cognitive manipulation, but children are remarkably resilient. With proper support, false narratives can be identified before they become entrenched." Colton nodded, grief and anger warring within him. "What about the medication?" "The pills were analyzed as a mild herbal supplement with calming properties," Dr. Washington replied. "Not harmful, but certainly not something that should have been given without your knowledge or consent as a parent." The first supervised visitation with Bridget occurred at a family counseling center, with a court-appointed supervisor present throughout. Colton watched through a one-way observation window as Liam initially ran to Bridget with genuine excitement, then gradually grew withdrawn as she whispered to him between activities. After the visit, Dr. Washington joined Colton in the observation room. "I'll be reporting several concerning interactions to the judge," she said without preamble. Dr. Wade attempted multiple instances of narrative reinforcement despite the supervisor's presence. Meaning, phrases like "remember how Daddy would slam doors," and "isn't it nice to feel safe with Mommy?" Subtle but deliberate reinforcement of negative associations with you. Colton's hands clenched. Will this affect her visitation rights? Almost certainly. The supervisor already documented the infractions. Dr. Washington studied him. "How are you holding up through all this?" The question caught him off guard. Everyone had been focused on Liam, rightfully so, but no one had asked about Colton's own psychological state. He hesitated. Functioning, focused on Liam, and beneath that, furious, heartbroken, terrified of what they've already done to him. The admission released something tight in his chest. "I restore buildings for a living, Dr. Washington. I know how to repair physical damage, strengthen foundations, rebuild after collapse. But this psychological damage to my son, I don't know how to restore that." Dr. Washington nodded. "The good news is that children Liam's age have incredibly plastic minds. Yes, they're vulnerable to manipulation, but they're equally responsive to healing." She leaned forward. What Bridget and Hawthorne attempted was to create false scaffolding in Liam's mind. Our job is to carefully dismantle that scaffolding before it becomes part of his permanent structure. The architectural metaphor resonated with Colton. And how do we do that? By providing stability, consistency, and emotional safety. By neither reinforcing nor directly challenging the implanted narratives, but creating space for Liam to recognize inconsistencies himself. She smiled gently. "In many ways, it's not unlike your restoration work. We identify the original structure beneath later additions and carefully remove what doesn't belong." For the first time since discovering Bridget's betrayal, Colton felt a spark of genuine hope. "Thank you," he said simply. As he drove Liam back to the cottage that evening, watching his son point excitedly at dogs in the park they passed, Colton allowed himself to believe that restoration was possible, that the damage could be repaired before it became permanent. What he couldn't know was that Bridget and Hawthorne had already escalated their strategy to a level he hadn't anticipated, setting in motion events that would soon force a more drastic intervention than family court could provide. Chapter 6. Turning Point. The Psychology Board investigation moved with unexpected speed, spurred by the serious nature of the allegations and Judge Hargrove's direct referral. Within 10 days, both Bridget and Hawthorne received formal notices of ethics investigations, including temporary practice restrictions prohibiting them from treating minors pending the outcome. For Bridget, the professional threat ignited fury that transcended calculation. Her first supervised visitation following the notice was canceled when she arrived with Hawthorne, a clear violation of the court order specifying he have no contact with Liam. Her second visitation, 3 days later, ended abruptly when the supervisor intervened after Bridget began questioning Liam about whether Daddy ever touched him in ways that felt uncomfortable. "She's escalating," Donovan warned during their preparation meeting for the upcoming full hearing. The professional threats have pushed her toward desperate measures, including false abuse allegations, Vivian added grimly. Colton ran a hand over his face. "How do we counter that?" "We've been documenting everything," Donovan reminded him. Dr. Washington's reports clearly establish attempts at narrative implantation. The supervisor's documentation of inappropriate questioning supports our case that she's trying to manufacture allegations. "But it's terrifying nonetheless," Colton said quietly. "One successful false narrative, one believable coach statement from Liam, and my life is effectively over." Donovan nodded, understanding the gravity. "That's why we're pursuing multiple protective measures. The court has already restricted her access. Dr. Washington is skilled at identifying coaching, and we're gathering evidence about their broader professional misconduct to establish pattern and intent." "Any progress with the Atlanta case?" Vivian asked. "Finally, yes," Donovan replied. "My investigator located the family who filed the original complaint against Hawthorne. Their daughter, 11 at the time, was being treated for anxiety following her parents' divorce. Hawthorne allegedly used his reconditioning protocols to implant negative memories about her father. Exactly what they're attempting with Liam, Colton said. "Yes, but this case goes further. The girl became suicidal when the cognitive dissonance between implanted memories and her actual experiences became too great to reconcile." Donovan's expression hardened. The family dropped their complaint after Hawthorne's attorney threatened to expose private therapy details that would have been devastating for the child. "Blackmail," Vivian stated flatly. "Essentially, but now they're willing to testify about what happened, especially knowing another child is at risk." The revelation painted an even darker picture of what they were facing. If Hawthorne was willing to blackmail a family using their child's private therapy information, what other ethical boundaries would he and Bridget cross? The answer came sooner than expected. That evening, as Colton helped Liam with bath time at the cottage, his phone rang with Ruben's number. "Someone broke into your office," Ruben said without preamble. "Trashed the place, took your laptop and files." Colton froze, one hand still holding a rubber duck. "Police. Already here. They want you to come identify what's missing. I can't leave Liam. Sophia's on her way to watch him. Lock the doors until she arrives." The gravity in Ruben's voice triggered Colton's alarm. "You think this is connected? Files on architectural projects don't typically warrant break-ins, Colt. And the timing is suspicious." After Sophia arrived, Colton drove to his office downtown. The space had been ransacked, drawers emptied, files scattered, his computer stolen. More disturbingly, the intruder had left a clear message. The only item destroyed rather than stolen was a framed photo of Liam, the glass shattered and the photo slashed. Detective Marcia Oakes, a veteran investigator with Durham PD, interviewed Colton at the scene. "Any enemies, Mr. Wade?" "Disgruntled clients, business rivals." Colton explained the custody situation concisely. "Divorce often brings out the worst in people," Oakes noted, But this level of targeting suggests something beyond typical spite. What might they have been looking for? Evidence, Colton realized. I've been gathering information about their psychological techniques. Research papers, case studies, testimonials from former patients, all documenting what I believe they've been doing to children, including my son. Oakes studied the vandalized photo. This suggests personal animus rather than just evidence removal. A warning, perhaps. Or a threat, Colton added quietly. I'd advise security precautions, Oakes said. Surveillance, changing routines, careful monitoring of your son's school and activities. The detective's words settled like lead in Colton's stomach. What had begun as a painful divorce had escalated to property crime and implied threats against Liam. Donovan, when informed, immediately petitioned for additional protective measures. Judge Hargrove granted an expanded order prohibiting both Bridget and Hawthorne from approaching Colton's workplace, Liam's school, or their temporary residence. 2 days before the full custody hearing, the case took an unexpected turn. Dr. Washington arrived at the cottage for Liam's session, visibly troubled. "We need to talk," she told Colton after Liam settled with his toys in the therapy space. "Something concerning happened during his session yesterday." "What is it?" Liam suddenly began reciting, almost verbatim, a narrative about you that was clearly rehearsed. "Daddy is a dangerous man," were his exact words, followed by specific descriptions of threatening behavior that don't match any observed interactions. Colton felt the blood drain from his face. "But Bridget hasn't had unsupervised access to him." "I know, which is why this is particularly alarming. The phrasing, the delivery, it was as if a switch had been flipped." Dr. Washington leaned forward. "Has anything unusual happened recently? Any unexpected visitors, phone calls, deliveries?" Colton thought carefully. "Nothing except," he stopped. "Wait, Bridget sent a care package for Liam 2 days ago. Books, a stuffed animal, some candy. The supervisor inspected it before giving it to him." "What books?" "Children's books. One about dinosaurs, one about—" Colton suddenly stood. "The bedtime book. It's new. He's been insisting on reading it every night." He retrieved the book from Liam's room. A professionally printed story about a boy whose father had a secret angry side that others couldn't see. The narrative subtly reinforced exactly the conditioning they'd been concerned about. "This is extremely sophisticated," Dr. Washington said, examining the book. "The imagery, the repetitive phrasing, is designed to reinforce specific narratives during the suggestible pre-sleep state. How did this get past the supervisor? It looks like an ordinary children's book. Without reading it closely, one wouldn't notice the psychological manipulation embedded in the story." She closed the book with evident disgust. "I'm confiscating this as evidence and reporting it to the judge immediately." The discovery reinforced the lengths to which Bridget and Hawthorne would go. If they would create custom manipulative children's literature, what else might they attempt? The answer came that night. After putting Liam to bed, Colton sat reviewing documents for the upcoming hearing when Sophia knocked urgently at the cottage door. "There's something you need to see," she said, leading him to the main house where Reuben waited with his laptop. "I installed additional security cameras after the office break-in," Reuben explained. "This was captured an hour ago." The footage showed Hawthorne's car driving slowly past the property, stopping briefly while he appeared to photograph the cottage. More disturbing, he wasn't alone. A second man sat in the passenger seat, someone Colton didn't recognize. "I called Detective Oakes," Reuben said. "She's sending a patrol car to monitor the property tonight, but she's concerned this may be escalating beyond simple surveillance." The implications chilled Colton. Were they planning something more direct than manipulation and legal maneuvering? His phone rang, Donovan calling with news that seemed to confirm these fears. "One of Hawthorne's former research assistants contacted me after seeing the ethics investigation notice," she said. "He's willing to testify that Hawthorne's work went far beyond published protocols. Apparently, he developed techniques for creating what he called permanent narrative restructuring in children, essentially irreversible memory manipulation." "Why would he develop something like that?" Colton asked. "Initially for severe trauma cases, But the assistant became concerned when Hawthorne began discussing applications for custody disputes. He specifically mentioned creating testimony that would be forensically indistinguishable from genuine recollection. He was developing methods to weaponize children in court. Exactly. And according to this whistleblower, Bridget became involved when she approached Hawthorne about a particularly difficult custody case she was consulting on. The pieces aligned with horrifying clarity. Their relationship had likely begun as professional collaboration in manipulating children's testimony, evolved into an affair, and now threatened Liam directly. The hearing is in 2 days, Colton said. Will this whistleblower's testimony be ready? He's giving a formal statement tomorrow. But Colton, Donovan hesitated. Given the escalation we're seeing, I'm concerned about waiting 2 more days. With their professional licenses and reputations on the line, Bridget and Hawthorne may attempt something desperate. The warning echoed his own fears. What options do we have? I'm filing for an emergency protective order first thing tomorrow, based on the surveillance evidence and new testimony. In the meantime, take additional security precautions. Don't leave Liam alone for a moment. After ending the call, Colton returned to the cottage, checking locks and windows before looking in on his sleeping son. Liam lay peaceful, clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur, blissfully unaware of the psychological warfare being waged over his developing mind. Colton settled in a chair beside Liam's bed, determined to stand guard through the night. As he watched his son's gentle breathing, a quiet resolve crystallized within him. Whatever happened in court, whatever legal battles lay ahead, he would protect Liam from becoming a casualty of Bridget and Hawthorne's manipulation by any means necessary. The next morning, 1 day before the scheduled full hearing, Colton received a call from Dr. Washington that changed everything. The court clerk just contacted me, she said, voice tight with concern. Dr. Wade's attorney has submitted a motion to present testimony from Liam directly to the judge in chambers. They're claiming he's made serious allegations that warrant immediate protective intervention. What allegations? Colton asked, dread pooling in his stomach. They're not specifying the motion, but the implication is clear. They're attempting to get Liam before the judge to deliver their coach testimony before our whistleblower can testify. Can they do that? Judge Hargrove is unlikely to allow it given the documented concerns about manipulation, but they're creating a record of attempting to protect the child while forcing us to appear obstructionist. When will the judge rule on their motion? That's the concerning part, Dr. Washington replied. The motion hearing is scheduled for 2 p.m. today. Judge Hargrove wants all parties present, including Liam, though she's indicated he'll wait with court staff until a decision about his testimony is made. The accelerated timeline confirmed Donovan's warnings about desperate measures. With the ethics investigation advancing and the whistleblower prepared to testify, Bridget and Hawthorne were making their move before their case completely collapsed. By noon, preparations were complete. Liam was dressed in his favorite blue button-down shirt and khaki pants, prepared for court, but told only that he would be meeting with some people who help families. Colton had explained that both Mommy and Daddy would be there, but that he would stay with Colton the whole time. As they prepared to leave for the courthouse, Detective Oakes called with disturbing news. We identified the second man in the surveillance footage from last night, she said. Jason Mercer, former clinical psychology researcher, lost his license 3 years ago for ethics violations involving experimental treatments. He was subsequently investigated for transporting minors across state lines in a custody interference case, though charges were eventually dropped. The implications were clear. You think they're planning to take Liam? It's a concerning possibility, especially given the timing. I've assigned plainclothes officers to monitor the courthouse. I'll be there personally as well. With this added layer of tension, Colton drove carefully to the Durham County Courthouse, constantly checking the rearview mirror for any sign of surveillance. Liam chatted happily beside him, pointing out trucks and asking if they could get ice cream afterward. Absolutely, Colton promised, forcing lightness into his voice. We'll celebrate seeing the judge. The courthouse security was a brief relief. Armed officers, metal detectors, ID checks. Donovan met them in the lobby, escorting them to a conference room where they would wait until the hearing. Judge Hargrove reviewed our emergency filing this morning. She informed Colton quietly. She's aware of the surveillance concerns and a new whistleblower testimony. And Bridget's motion to have Liam testify. We filed opposing documentation emphasizing Dr. Washington's concerns about coaching and manipulation. The judge will decide during the initial portion of the hearing. Liam occupied himself with a coloring book while they waited, Colton vigilant beside him. At 1:45, a court officer arrived to escort them to courtroom 3B. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Colton spotted Bridget standing with Collins, her attorney. She wore a conservative navy dress that emphasized her professional demeanor. Their eyes met briefly, hers confident, almost triumphant. The feeling of walking into a trap intensified as they entered the courtroom. Judge Hargrove was already seated, reviewing documents. Hawthorne sat in the gallery behind Bridget's table, his presence technically allowable since he wasn't directly prohibited from court proceedings. Before we begin, Judge Hargrove announced once everyone was seated, I'll address the motion regarding the minor child's testimony. She looked toward Liam, who sat beside Colton, swinging his legs nervously. Mr. Wade, I've arranged for Liam to wait with Ms. Peterson from Family Services while we address preliminary matters. A kind-faced woman approached, introducing herself to Liam. Colton squeezed his son's hand reassuringly. I'll see you very soon, buddy. Ms. Peterson is going to show you a special room with toys while the grown-ups talk. Liam nodded bravely, though his eyes darted anxiously toward Bridget. Will Mommy be there too? No, sweetheart, Ms. Peterson answered gently. Just you and me for now. As Liam departed with the Family Services officer, Colton noticed Bridget exchange a significant glance with Hawthorne. Something about their confidence, despite all the mounting evidence against them, triggered his instincts for structural weakness. They still believed they held an advantage, but what? Judge Hargrove addressed the motion directly. Dr. Wade's request to present the child's testimony is denied at this time, she stated firmly. Given the documented concerns about potential psychological manipulation, any testimony from the minor would be inherently suspect. Collins began to protest, but the judge continued. Furthermore, I've reviewed the supplemental filing regarding Dr. Hawthorne's research and the testimony from his former research assistant. The allegations are extremely serious and directly relevant to this case. She turned toward Hawthorne in the gallery. Dr. Hawthorne, while you're not a party to this custody matter, your professional conduct is under scrutiny as it relates to the welfare of the child. The court has referred these allegations to both the Psychology Board and the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal investigation. A murmur ran through the courtroom at this announcement. Criminal investigation was a significant escalation beyond professional sanctions. Bridget leaned urgently toward Collins, whispering something that caused him to stand. Your Honor, given these serious allegations, we request a continuance to prepare an appropriate response. Denied, Judge Hargrove replied crisply. This hearing concerns the immediate welfare of a child potentially subject to psychological manipulation. That takes precedence over procedural considerations. As the judge continued outlining the order of presentations, a court officer entered urgently, approaching the bench. After a brief, whispered exchange, Judge Hargrove's expression darkened. We have a situation, she announced, rising. This court is in recess for 15 minutes. As she departed quickly with the officer, confusion spread through the courtroom. Donovan immediately approached the clerk, returning to Colton with alarm evident on her face. There's a problem with Liam, she said quietly. He's not in the waiting room. The world tilted beneath Colton's feet. What do you mean he's not there? Ms. Peterson stepped out briefly to retrieve art supplies from the adjacent office. When she returned, Liam was gone. Cold fear washed through Colton as he turned toward Bridget and Hawthorne, only to find Hawthorne's seat empty. Bridget remained, her expression carefully composed despite the chaos developing around her. Detective Oakes, who had been observing from the back of the courtroom, immediately took charge, issuing orders into her radio as courthouse security implemented lockdown procedures. When exactly did the family services officer leave him alone? She demanded of the flustered clerk. Only for 2 minutes, approximately 7 minutes ago, the clerk reported. 7 minutes. Oakes repeated grimly. They could be anywhere by now. Court officers began searching the building while Oakes pulled Colton aside. Dr. Hawthorne is also missing, and a black sedan matching the description of the vehicle from last night's surveillance was seen leaving the judicial complex parking lot 3 minutes ago. The implication struck Colton with physical force. They've taken him. Bridget created a distraction with her motion while Hawthorne extracted Liam. We don't know that for certain, Oakes cautioned, though her expression suggested otherwise. Colton turned toward Bridget, who sat conferring with Collins, her posture relaxed despite the emergency unfolding around her. Rage and terror propelled him across the courtroom before Donovan could intercept him. Where is he? Colton demanded, his voice carrying through the chaotic space. Where have they taken Liam? Bridget looked up with practiced confusion. I have no idea what you're talking about, Colton. I've been right here the entire time. Dr. Hawthorne disappeared at exactly the same time as Liam. This was coordinated. That's a serious allegation, Collins interjected. My client has been present in court throughout these proceedings. Your client and Hawthorne planned this, Colton pressed, desperation edging his voice. They knew they were losing, that the evidence against them was overwhelming. So they've taken Liam, just like they did in Atlanta. A flicker of something, surprise, concern, crossed Bridget's face at the mention of Atlanta. Detective Oakes approached, addressing Bridget directly. Dr. Wade, we have reasonable suspicion that your associate, Dr. Wesley Hawthorne, may have removed your son from court premises without authorization. If you have any information about his whereabouts, withholding it would constitute criminal obstruction. This is absurd, Bridget replied, though her composure showed the first cracks. Wesley occasionally consults with me professionally, but he would never. We have video surveillance of Dr. Hawthorne and another man monitoring Mr. Wade's residence last night. Oakes interrupted. The second individual has been identified as Jason Mercer, previously investigated for parental kidnapping. Now, both Hawthorne and your son are missing simultaneously. The color drained from Bridget's face. That can't be right. Collins leaned close, whispering urgently in Bridget's ear. Her expression shifted from shock to calculation to something approaching fear. If you know anything, Bridget, Colton pleaded, terror overwhelming anger. Please. This is Liam we're talking about. Before she could respond, Judge Hargrove returned, her expression grave. This court is now addressing an emergency child abduction situation. Dr. Wade, the court has been informed that Dr. Hawthorne left the building at approximately the same time as your son's disappearance. Security footage shows him meeting briefly with you outside courtroom 3B before the hearing began. Explain this connection immediately. Collins attempted to intervene, but the judge silenced him with a sharp gesture. This is not about legal positioning anymore, counselor. A child is missing from court custody. That supersedes all other considerations. Bridget's carefully constructed facade began crumbling visibly. Wesley was supposed to help document the proceedings. I had no knowledge of any plan to. Phone records indicate 3 calls between you and Dr. Hawthorne this morning, with text messages exchanged as recently as 20 minutes ago, Judge Hargrove stated, reviewing information provided by court security. Furthermore, your phone shows communication with a number registered to Jason Mercer within the past hour. The courtroom fell silent as the evidence mounted inexorably against Bridget. Dr. Wade, Detective Oakes said, stepping forward. At this point, we have probable cause to detain you for questioning regarding the disappearance of Liam Wade. You have the right to remain silent. Wait, Bridget interjected, genuine panic replacing calculation. This wasn't supposed to happen. Wesley said he would create leverage for negotiation, not. She stopped abruptly, realizing her admission. Where's my son? Colton demanded, restrained now by Donovan's steadying hand on his arm. Bridget's composure shattered completely. I don't know exactly. Wesley said something about secure accommodations while we finalized the conditioning protocol. A private location where court orders couldn't interfere. Conditioning protocol? Judge Hargrove repeated, horror evident in her voice. It was supposed to be therapeutic, Bridget insisted, desperation replacing her professional demeanor. Liam would be returned after the hearing with clear memories that would support our custody position. It was just an intervention to secure the right outcome. The clinical description of planned psychological manipulation of a 5-year-old child stunned the courtroom into silence. You're telling us, Detective Oakes clarified, that Dr. Hawthorne has taken your son to an undisclosed location to perform unauthorized psychological procedures intended to manipulate his memories and testimony. Put so bluntly, even Bridget seemed to recognize the enormity of what she'd participated in. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she whispered. Wesley promised it would be safe, controlled. Judge Hargrove's expression hardened to granite. Dr. Wade, you are hereby found in contempt of court. Furthermore, I am referring this matter for immediate criminal investigation for child endangerment, custodial interference, and conspiracy to commit these offenses. To Detective Oakes, she added, Detective, please take Dr. Wade into custody and extract any information that might lead to locating the child. As officers led a visibly shaken Bridget away, Colton stood frozen in disbelief. His son, his 5-year-old boy, had been taken for the express purpose of psychological manipulation. Every fear he'd harbored about what Bridget and Hawthorne might do had materialized in the worst possible way. Detective Oakes approached him, determination etched across her features. We're mobilizing every resource to locate Liam. Amber Alert is already issued. Hawthorne's and Mercer's descriptions and vehicle details are being distributed to all regional law enforcement. That could take hours, days, Colton said, his voice hollow. And every minute, they're doing God knows what to Liam's mind. We'll find him, Oakes promised. Dr. Wade will likely provide information once the reality of her situation becomes clear. But Colton barely heard her. A terrible clarity was descending. The same focused determination he felt when assessing a critically damaged historical structure. Some situations couldn't be addressed through standard procedures. Some required immediate, decisive intervention. I need to make a call, he said, stepping away from the detective. In the hallway, he dialed Reuben. It's happened, he said when his friend answered. They've taken Liam, Hawthorne, and an accomplice. Bridget admitted it was planned. Jesus Christ, Reuben breathed. Police. Mobilizing, but who knows how long it will take. They don't even know where to look yet. But we might, Reuben said, understanding immediately. The tracking device. After the surveillance incident, they had taken the precaution of placing a small GPS tracker in Liam's favorite dinosaur stuffed animal, the one he carried everywhere. It had seemed paranoid at the time, but Colton had insisted after seeing Hawthorne monitoring the cottage. I'm checking the app now, Colton said, opening his phone. The tracking map loaded, showing a blinking dot moving north on I-85, approximately 30 miles outside Durham. I've got him. I'll meet you at the house in 15, Reuben said without hesitation. Sophia's brother is still a deputy in Person County. He'll help without the bureaucracy. Reuben, this could get... Don't even start. That boy's family to us too. The line disconnected. Colton slipped back into the courtroom, where Donovan was conferring with Judge Hargrove about emergency measures. Without drawing attention, he gathered his belongings and departed. In his truck, he studied the tracking map again. The blinking dot had exited the interstate, now moving along rural roads toward what appeared to be a lakeside area. Colton started the engine, determined to reach his son before Hawthorne could implement the conditioning protocol that would irrevocably alter Liam's mind. As he pulled away from the courthouse, a notification appeared on his phone, a text message from an unknown number. By the time you find him, he won't remember you as his father, only as the dangerous man who hurt him. WH. The taunting message, clearly from Hawthorne, ignited cold fury within Colton. This was no longer about custody or divorce or even professional misconduct. This was about rescuing his son from psychological torture designed to destroy their relationship forever. Whatever happened next, Colton knew with absolute certainty he would not allow Hawthorne to succeed. The man had not accounted for how dangerous a father could become when protecting his child. Chapter 7. Countermeasures. The lakeside cabin sat isolated among pine trees, accessible only by a winding gravel road. From his position in the underbrush, Colton observed the property through binoculars. A black sedan, matching the description from courthouse security, was parked beside a weather-worn porch. Smoke curled from the stone chimney despite the mild June weather. Beside him, Reuben checked the hunting rifle he'd brought, while Sophia's brother, Deputy Marshal Rivera, spoke quietly into his radio, coordinating with Person County Sheriff's units still en route. "They're at least 20 minutes out," Rivera reported, clicking off his radio. "Dispatch is trying to connect with Durham PD's task force, but jurisdictional handoffs are slowing things down." "We don't have 20 minutes, Colton replied, focusing the binoculars on a second-floor window where curtains occasionally moved. The tracking app shows Liam's inside, and Hawthorne made it clear what they're planning to do to him. Rivera studied the cabin with professional assessment. 2 entry points visible, front door and side entrance near what looks like kitchen. Unknown number of occupants. At minimum, Hawthorne and Mercer, possibly others. And they have Liam, Reuben added grimly, which complicates any approach. The deputy nodded. Standard procedure would be to establish a perimeter and negotiate. But with a child at risk of psychological harm rather than immediate physical danger. He hesitated. Protocol gets murky. Colton lowered the binoculars, decision crystallizing. "I'm not waiting for protocol while they manipulate my son's mind." "What are you thinking?" Reuben asked, recognizing the resolution in his friend's voice. "I built historical renovations for 15 years before moving to design. I know how to move through old structures silently." Colton pointed toward an old storm cellar entrance barely visible at the cabin's rear. "That likely connects to the main floor. While you two create a distraction at the front, I can enter undetected and locate Liam." Rivera frowned. "That's extremely risky. These men have already demonstrated they're willing to commit felonies. They've also demonstrated they're not violent criminals. They're arrogant academics who believe they're conducting justified psychological intervention." Colton's expression hardened. "They're not expecting physical confrontation. That's our advantage." After brief deliberation, they developed a plan. Rivera would approach openly as law enforcement, demanding to search the premises based on the Amber Alert. Reuben would position himself with a rifle as backup, covering the side exit. Colton would use the distraction to access the storm cellar and find Liam. 10 minutes, Rivera instructed, checking his sidearm. "If you haven't emerged with Liam by then, I'm calling for immediate tactical response. Jurisdiction issues be damned." Colton nodded, placing his phone on silent and rechecking the small recording device in his pocket, the same one that had captured Bridget's earlier admissions. Evidence would matter after Liam was safe. They separated, each moving to their positions. Colton circled wide through the trees, approaching the storm cellar from behind to avoid being seen from the cabin windows. The ancient wooden doors were secured with a rusted padlock that yielded easily to the small pry bar he'd brought from his truck. As he eased the door open, he heard Rivera's authoritative voice at the front of the cabin. "Person County Sheriff's Department. I need to speak with whoever's inside regarding an Amber Alert issued in Durham County." The distraction had begun. Colton slipped into the musty darkness of the cellar, using his phone's flashlight to navigate between stored furniture and boxes. At the far end, wooden stairs led upward to a door, likely connecting to the cabin's main floor. Upstairs, he heard muffled conversation, footsteps moving toward the front door. Testing each stair carefully to avoid creaks, Colton ascended to the cellar door and pressed his ear against it. From beyond, a man's voice, not Hawthorne's, spoke with irritation. "Deputy, I understand your concern, but as I've explained, we're conducting a private family therapy retreat. The boy's mother arranged everything." Rivera's response was professionally insistent. "Sir, an Amber Alert has been issued for Liam Wade. I need to confirm his whereabouts and well-being immediately." "This is ridiculous," the man, presumably Mercer, complained. "Dr. Hawthorne is in the middle of a critical therapeutic session. Interrupting now could be psychologically damaging to the child. The mention of an ongoing session sent urgency coursing through Colton. He tried the cellar door handle, locked from the other side. Using the pry bar again, he carefully manipulated the ancient latch mechanism until it gave way. The door opened into what appeared to be a pantry off the kitchen. Through the partially open pantry door, Colton could see Mercer standing in the cabin's main room, blocking the entrance while arguing with Rivera. The deputy was skillfully prolonging the conversation, keeping Mercer's attention fixed forward. "I insist on seeing appropriate documentation for this therapy retreat," Rivera was saying. "Without that, I'll need to conduct a welfare check on the minor." Colton slipped from the pantry into the kitchen, staying low behind counter. From somewhere upstairs came the faint sound of a child's voice, Liam's voice. Then Hawthorne's measured tones, though the words were indistinct. A narrow staircase led from the kitchen to the second floor. While Mercer continued arguing with Rivera, Colton moved silently toward the stairs, years of experience navigating old structures guiding his steps around creaking floorboards. The upper level had 3 doors leading off a narrow hallway. The first stood ajar, revealing an empty bedroom. The second was closed, but from behind the third came Hawthorne's voice, now clearly audible. "That's right, Liam. Now, remember how Daddy looked when he was angry? The dangerous man? Show me again. Like this." Liam's small voice responded, uncertainty evident even through the door. "Good," but his eyes were darker. "Remember how they got when he would slam things? When he scared you?" Colton activated the recorder in his pocket, documenting the manipulation in real time. Through a slight gap between door and frame, he could see part of the room. Hawthorne sat in a chair facing away from the entrance, while Liam perched on the edge of a bed, clutching his dinosaur stuffed animal, the one containing the tracking device. Various recording equipment stood on a table nearby, alongside what appeared to be a medical kit. "I don't remember Daddy slamming things," Liam said, confusion in his voice. "Yes, you do," Hawthorne insisted, his tone remaining gentle but insistent. "We talked about this. Sometimes memories hide because they're scary, but they're still there. That's why we're helping them come back. Now, let's try the special medicine again. It helps memories become clearer." Hawthorne reached for a small case on the table, removing what looked like a lozenge. "This will taste sweet like candy. It helps your brain remember the truth." The sight of Hawthorne administering an unknown substance to his son galvanized Colton into action. He pushed the door open forcefully, startling both occupants. "Get away from my son," he commanded, voice deadly calm despite the rage coursing through him. Hawthorne spun around, the lozenge dropping from his hand. "Wade, how did you?" "Daddy," Liam cried, leaping from the bed and running toward Colton before Hawthorne could intercept him. Colton swept his son into his arms, quickly checking him for any visible harm, while keeping his eyes fixed on Hawthorne. "Are you okay, buddy? Did he hurt you?" "We were playing memory games," Liam said uncertainly, "but they made my head feel funny." Hawthorne recovered quickly, his academic demeanor reasserting itself. "This is a serious interruption of a therapeutic protocol, Mr. Wade. You're causing psychological harm by disrupting the process." "Save it," Colton replied, backing toward the door with Liam secure in his arms. "The deputy downstairs has already called for backup, and my phone is recording everything. Your therapeutic protocol is documented for the authorities." A flash of genuine fear crossed Hawthorne's face, quickly replaced by calculation. "You misunderstand. We're helping Liam process implicit memories, experiences his conscious mind hasn't integrated. It's advanced therapeutic work. It's psychological abuse," Colton countered, attempting to implant false memories to manipulate court testimony. From downstairs came the sound of raised voices, Rivera apparently ending his pretense of polite inquiry with Mercer. "This is over, Hawthorne," Colton stated firmly. "Bridget's already in custody. She admitted everything." The psychologist's composure cracked visibly. "Bridget would never. She wouldn't implicate. She already has." Full confession in front of the judge. Explained how you planned to condition Liam to secure the custody outcome you wanted. Liam, still in Colton's arms, looked between the adults with confusion. Daddy, can we go home now? I don't like these games. Yes, buddy, we're leaving right now. Colton began moving toward the staircase, keeping his body between Liam and Hawthorne. The psychologist's expression darkened as his position collapsed. You have no idea what you're interfering with. This goes beyond a simple custody dispute. The protocols we've developed have implications far beyond. Save your justifications for the ethics board, Colton interrupted. In the criminal court, as they reached the stairs, shouting erupted from below, Mercer's voice, then Rivera's commanding tone. A sudden crash suggested physical confrontation. Hawthorne seized the distraction, lunging forward and grasping Colton's arm. You're not taking him. The protocol isn't complete. Balancing Liam carefully, Colton broke Hawthorne's grip with a sharp movement. The psychologist stumbled backward, colliding with the recording equipment, which crashed to the floor. As he regained his balance, Hawthorne's academic veneer vanished completely, replaced by cold fury. You think you've won? He snarled. That boy's mind belongs to us now. We've been conditioning him for months through Bridget. Little suggestions, subtle reinforcements. Even if you walk out today, the foundation is laid. Then I'll help him rebuild, Colton replied steadily. That's what I do, Hawthorne. I restore what matters. The sound of additional vehicles arriving outside, backup responding to Rivera's call, seemed to finally penetrate Hawthorne's determination. His gaze darted toward the window, then back to Colton and Liam. This isn't over, he stated, voice regaining its clinical detachment. The work we've done is too important to abandon. It's over for you, Colton responded, retreating down the stairs with Liam held securely against his chest. Hold tight, buddy. We're going home. In the main room, Rivera had Mercer face down on the floor, handcuffed. 2 additional deputies had just entered, weapons ready. Hawthorne's upstairs. Colton informed them as he moved toward the exit. Reuben, he called. His friend appeared in the doorway, rifle lowered but ready. Got him, he confirmed, relief evident in his voice. Hey, little man, he added to Liam, his tone deliberately light. Some adventure, huh? Uncle Reuben. Liam brightened slightly, though he maintained his grip on Colton's neck. The doctor man made me eat candy that tasted funny. Rivera looked up sharply from securing Mercer. What kind of candy? We need to know what substances they administered. Evidence is upstairs, Colton replied, the recorder still running in his pocket, along with their equipment and recordings. Hawthorne explicitly admitted attempting to implant false memories for court testimony. One deputy moved upstairs to secure Hawthorne while Rivera radioed for medical support to evaluate Liam. Outside, additional law enforcement vehicles were arriving, including unmarked cars that likely contained investigators from Durham. In the safety of Colton's truck, with Reuben standing guard outside, Liam finally relaxed his death grip on his father's neck. Those weren't fun games, Daddy, he said quietly. Dr. West kept making me say things about you that didn't happen, and showing me pictures that made me feel scared. Colton swallowed hard, maintaining a calm expression despite the rage threatening to overwhelm him. I know, buddy, those weren't okay games. But you know what? Your brain is super smart. It knows what really happened and what didn't. Like when dinosaurs aren't real in movies? Exactly like that, Colton agreed, seizing the perfect analogy. Your brain knows the difference between real memories and pretend ones. Liam considered this, then nodded solemnly. I told Dr. West that you never slammed doors or had scary eyes, but he said I just couldn't remember right. You remembered perfectly, Colton assured him, holding his son close. You're the bravest, smartest boy I know. As medical personnel arrived to check Liam, followed by Detective Oakes and the specialized team from Durham, Colton watched the cabin where Hawthorne was being let out in handcuffs. The psychologist's composed facade had completely crumbled, replaced by the desperate anger of a man whose life's work was collapsing around him. Whatever damage Hawthorne and Bridget had attempted to inflict on Liam's developing mind, Colton vowed to counter it with something stronger: consistent love, security, and the patient restoration of truth. Just as he had rebuilt countless historical structures from damaged foundations, he would help his son distinguish between genuine memories and the false narratives they had tried to implant. The true reconstruction was just beginning. Chapter 8. Rebuilding. The county courthouse looked different this time, less intimidating despite the gravity of the proceedings inside. 6 weeks had passed since Liam's rescue from the lakeside cabin. 6 weeks of healing, evaluation, and careful rebuilding of security. Colton straightened his tie as he and Donovan prepared to enter the courtroom for the final custody determination. Across the corridor, Dr. Eliza Washington sat with Liam, who was contentedly drawing in a sketchbook. The boy's resilience continued to amaze Colton. While he still occasionally asked confused questions about the memory games or experienced nightmares, his natural psychological defenses had rejected much of the manipulation Hawthorne had attempted. The forensic psychology report is definitive, Donovan reminded Colton, reviewing their materials one last time. Dr. Washington and 2 independent evaluators have documented the attempted manipulation and confirmed Liam shows no signs of actual traumatic experiences with you. The court-appointed guardian ad litem is recommending full custody to you with supervised therapeutic visitation for Bridget only after she completes extensive psychological evaluation. Colton nodded, watching Liam laugh at something Dr. Washington said. And the criminal cases? Proceeding separately. Hawthorne is facing charges of kidnapping, child endangerment, conspiracy, and practicing psychological manipulation without consent. The substances found at the cabin were analyzed as mild sedatives and suggestibility enhancers, not approved for therapeutic use, especially in children. That's added charges of administering controlled substances to a minor. And Bridget. Donovan's expression tightened slightly. Her cooperation after her initial confession has led to reduced charges, but she's still facing child endangerment, conspiracy, and professional misconduct charges. Her attorney is attempting a mental health defense, claiming Hawthorne manipulated her professionally before developing their personal relationship. This didn't surprise Colton. Even in custody, Bridget would find a way to position herself as a victim rather than perpetrator. The most significant development, Donovan continued, is the expanded investigation into their professional work. 3 other families have come forward with similar allegations involving custody cases Bridget consulted on where Hawthorne provided specialized intervention. The Psychology Board has suspended both their licenses pending criminal outcomes. The courtroom doors opened, and they were called to enter. Inside, Judge Hargrove presided over a much smaller proceeding than the dramatic hearing 6 weeks earlier. Bridget sat with Collins, her appearance markedly different. Gone was the polished professional demeanor, replaced by a carefully cultivated vulnerability. Her hair was simply styled, her clothing modest and understated. The visual embodiment of the manipulated colleague narrative her defense was constructing. These proceedings will determine final custody arrangements for Liam Matthew Wade. Judge Hargrove began once all parties were seated. Given the extraordinary circumstances surrounding this case, the court has conducted thorough evaluation of the minor child's psychological well-being and the parental capacity of both parties. She reviewed the extensive documentation before her, including Dr. Washington's reports, the guardian ad litem's recommendations, and evaluations of both Colton and Bridget. The evidence before this court establishes a deliberate pattern of psychological manipulation directed at the minor child for the purpose of influencing custody proceedings, Judge Hargrove stated, her tone leaving no room for equivocation. This manipulation was designed and implemented collaboratively by Dr. Bridget Wade and Dr. Wesley Hawthorne, constituting one of the most disturbing abuses of professional psychological training this court has encountered. Bridget kept her gaze downcast, the picture of remorse, though Colton noted she showed no visible reaction to the judge's characterization. While criminal proceedings will address the legal consequences of these actions, this court's primary consideration is the immediate and long-term well-being of Liam Wade. Judge Hargrove turned her attention directly to Colton. Mr. Wade has demonstrated extraordinary commitment to his son's protection and psychological recovery, while maintaining appropriate boundaries regarding the minor's relationship with his mother despite profound provocation. She then addressed Bridget. Dr. Wade, Your professional training makes your participation in psychological manipulation of your own child particularly egregious. The court cannot ignore that you utilized specialized knowledge to attempt harm to the parent-child bond between Liam and his father, harm that could have had lifelong consequences. Bridget finally spoke, her voice carefully modulated to convey emotional distress. Your Honor, I deeply regret my actions and the harm caused to my son. I was operating under Dr. Hawthorne's influence and professional guidance, believing his assertions that we were helping Liam process emotional difficulties. Judge Hargrove's expression remained skeptical. Dr. Wade, the evidence, including your own recorded statements, contradicts this characterization. You explicitly discussed implanting false memories to secure favorable custody outcomes. As a child psychologist, you were uniquely positioned to understand the harmful nature of these interventions. After reviewing additional evidence and recommendations, Judge Hargrove delivered her ruling. This court awards sole legal and physical custody of Liam Matthew Wade to Colton Wade. Dr. Bridget Wade is granted supervised therapeutic visitation contingent upon completion of psychological evaluation and treatment as specified in the court order. The additional provisions were extensive. Mandatory therapy for Liam with Dr. Washington continuing as his primary psychologist. Quarterly court review of the custody arrangement. Supervised visitation for Bridget limited to 2 hours twice monthly in a therapeutic setting. And prohibition of any contact between Liam and Dr. Hawthorne. Mr. Wade, Judge Hargrove concluded, the court recognizes the extraordinary measures you took to protect your son. Your commitment to his well-being has been exemplary throughout these proceedings. The court is confident in your ability to help Liam process these events and move forward in a healthy manner. As the proceedings concluded, Bridget approached Colton under the watchful eye of her attorney and the court officer. This isn't justice, she stated quietly, the vulnerable facade slipping momentarily. Wesley and I were developing protocols that could help countless traumatized children. Your interference has set that work back years. Colton regarded her calmly, seeing clearly now what he had missed during their marriage. The clinical detachment that prioritized abstract outcomes over individual well-being, even when the individual was her own son. There's a difference between healing trauma and manufacturing it. Bridget, I hope someday you understand that. She studied him with professional assessment. You've changed. The Colton I married would have compromised, looked for middle ground. I'm still a restorationist, he replied simply. I've just learned to recognize what's worth saving and what needs to be removed for the structure to stand strong again. Without waiting for her response, he turned away to join Liam and Dr. Washington. As they left the courthouse together, Liam holding tightly to his hand, Colton felt the weight of the past months beginning to lift. The legal battle was essentially over. The real work, the careful, patient restoration of his son's sense of security and trust, continued. In the months that followed, life established a new pattern centered around Liam's healing and growth. They moved into a small craftsman bungalow near Reuben and Sophia. Not as grand as their former home, but solid, with good bones and plenty of character for Colton to gradually restore. The symbolism wasn't lost on him, building a new home while rebuilding their lives. Dr. Washington continued working with Liam weekly, her gentle expertise helping him process the confusion Hawthorne's manipulation had created. Children are remarkably resilient, she explained during one of their parent consultations. Liam's natural skepticism actually protected him from the most invasive conditioning. He kept questioning the memory games because they didn't align with his actual experiences with you. The criminal proceedings advanced. Hawthorne, denied bail due to flight risk, awaited trial on multiple charges. Investigations into his previous work uncovered a pattern of ethical violations spanning years. Cases where he had applied his reconditioning protocols without full disclosure or appropriate oversight. Bridget, granted bail with strict limitations, pursued her influence colleague defense with strategic determination. The professional consequences were already devastating. Her license suspended, her practice closed, her academic standing revoked. Yet through careful legal maneuvering and strategic cooperation with investigators, she appeared positioned to avoid the most serious criminal penalties. Colton found he cared less about her punishment than he once might have. His focus remained squarely on Liam's recovery and their shared future. The supervised visitations, initially tense and awkward, gradually established a new rhythm where Liam could maintain a relationship with his mother within safe boundaries. On a crisp October morning, 1 year after the custody battle began, Colton stood in the backyard of their bungalow, watching Liam and Ranger play an elaborate game involving dinosaurs, Lego structures, and an imaginary lava field. The boys' laughter, free, uninhibited, genuine, was the most powerful confirmation that healing was progressing. Ruben approached, carrying coffee mugs for them both. "The back porch restoration is looking good," he commented, nodding toward Colton's weekend project. "Original railings?" "Reproductions," Colton replied, accepting the coffee. "Couldn't salvage the originals, but these are milled to match the 1930s profile." "Just like old times," Ruben observed. "You always did have a talent for knowing what could be saved and what needed to be replaced." The observation carried weight beyond architecture, and both men knew it. "Heard anything about the Hawthorne trial?" Ruben asked after a moment. "Scheduled for January. Prosecution has 3 former research assistants testifying about unauthorized protocols, plus the families from Atlanta and 2 other cases." Colton watched Liam demonstrate a particularly impressive dinosaur roar for Ranger's benefit. The evidence from the cabin was damning. Detailed notes on the conditioning schedule for Liam, recordings of previous sessions with Bridget. It's comprehensive. And Bridget's plea deal, finalized last week, reduced charges in exchange for full testimony against Hawthorne. 2 years probation, permanent revocation of her psychology license, and continued supervised-only access to Liam pending ongoing therapeutic evaluation. Ruben shook his head. "Seems light considering what she did." "It is," Colton agreed. "But the criminal justice outcome was never my primary concern. Liam's safety and recovery were the only goals that really mattered." They watched in companionable silence as Liam constructed an elaborate safe zone for his dinosaurs, his approach reminiscent of Colton's own careful restoration work. "He's going to be okay," Ruben said with certainty. "Better than okay." "I know." Colton smiled as Liam looked up, waving for them to admire his creation. "We're rebuilding piece by piece. The foundation's solid now." 4 years later, 9-year-old Liam Wade stood before his 3rd grade class, confidently presenting his People Who Help Others project. On a carefully constructed display board, he had arranged photos and descriptions of various careers: firefighters, doctors, teachers, and in the center, restoration architects. "My dad fixes buildings that are very old and important," he explained to his classmates. "He has to figure out what parts are still strong and what parts need to be fixed or replaced. It's like being a doctor for buildings. Sometimes people want to just tear down old buildings because fixing them is harder, but my dad says that's losing all the good parts along with the broken ones." His teacher, Ms. Pham, smiled encouragingly. "And why do you think restoration architecture helps others, Liam?" The boy considered this thoughtfully. "Dad says that buildings tell stories about the past, and if we lose them, we lose those stories. When he fixes a building, he's saving its story so people can keep learning from it." He pointed to a before and after photo of a Victorian library Colton had restored. "Plus, fixed buildings are safer and stronger, even though they look old on the outside." From the back of the classroom, where parents had gathered for the presentations, Colton listened with quiet pride. The metaphor wasn't lost on him. Like the buildings he restored, Liam carried his history with him, including the difficult chapters. But through patience, expertise, and careful attention to the original structure, the damage had been addressed without destroying what made him uniquely himself. The supervised visitations with Bridget had gradually expanded as Liam grew older and demonstrated resilience. While she would never have unsupervised access, their relationship had established its own careful boundaries. Hawthorne, serving 15 years for multiple convictions, was permanently barred from any contact with Liam or other minors upon his eventual release. As Liam concluded his presentation and returned to his seat, exchanging a quick thumbs up with his father, Colton reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The initial discovery of betrayal, the custody battle, the desperate rescue, all had forged something unexpected, a father and son whose bond had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. Later that evening, as they walked home from the neighborhood ice cream shop, Liam's mind circled back to his presentation. "Dad, do you think I could be a restoration architect too someday?" "You could be anything you set your mind to," Colton replied honestly. "You've already got the most important quality." "What's that?" "You can see the difference between what's worth saving and what needs to be left behind. That's the heart of restoration work." Liam nodded sagely, processing this with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "Like with memories, right? Dr. Eliza says I did a good job keeping the real ones, even when the fake ones try to take over." The simple observation, so profound from a 9-year-old, caught Colton by surprise. "Exactly like that, champion." "That's exactly right." As they continued home in the gathering twilight, Liam's hand secure in his, Colton recognized the truth in his son's words. The most important restoration project hadn't been any of the historic buildings that had built his career. It had been the careful, patient rebuilding of a young mind's ability to trust its own experiences, to distinguish authentic foundation from false construction. The dangerous man Hawthorne and Bridget had tried to create in Liam's perception had never taken hold. Instead, the truth had prevailed, a father who would go to any length to protect his son, and a bond that couldn't be manipulated or broken. Some structures, once properly restored, stood stronger than they had before the damage occurred. Looking at his son, confident, thoughtful, resilient, Colton knew they were living proof of that architectural truth. Chapter 9. Solid Ground. The lakeside property looked different in summer sunlight than it had 4 years earlier on that desperate night. The old cabin had been thoroughly renovated, its weathered exterior now restored to original condition, while the interior had been completely modernized. The surrounding grounds, once overgrown, now featured carefully maintained gardens and a dock extending into the clear water. "Are you sure about this?" Reuben asked, standing beside Colton on the porch as they surveyed the completed restoration. "It's time," Colton replied, watching Liam and Reuben's daughter Emma's skipping stones at the lake's edge. At 11, the children had become inseparable friends despite their 2-year age difference. Reclaiming places that hold difficult memories is part of the healing process. Dr. Washington agrees. The renovation project had been deliberate, purchasing the property where Hawthorne had taken Liam and transforming it from a place of trauma to a weekend retreat for their extended chosen family. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it was powerful. What had once represented Liam's most frightening experience had been rebuilt into something beautiful and secure. Inside, Sophia was arranging lunch with Vivian, who had relocated from Portland to Durham 2 years prior. The women's voices drifted through open windows, punctuated by occasional laughter. "How's Liam feeling about the visitation changes?" Reuben asked, referring to the recent court modification allowing Bridget slightly expanded access now that Liam had turned 11. "He's handling it well. The additional hour isn't much change, and he actually requested it himself." Colton watched his son successfully skip a stone 5 times across the lake surface. He's developed a remarkably mature perspective about Bridget. Understands she made terrible choices, but doesn't need to hate her for it. "That's all your influence," Reuben observed. "You've never poisoned that relationship despite having every reason to." Colton shook his head. "That's all Liam. He's naturally empathetic, but with strong boundaries. Dr. Washington says he has an unusual ability to maintain emotional connections while protecting himself from manipulation. Wonder where he got that from," Reuben remarked with a meaningful glance at his friend. In the years since the custody battle, Colton had expanded his restoration practice to include specialized consulting for historical properties affected by trauma, sites of accidents, violence, or tragedy that needed both physical renovation and symbolic reclamation. His unique perspective had created an unexpected niche that blended architectural expertise with psychological sensitivity. The dock creaked as Vivian joined them, wine glass in hand. Sophia says lunch is ready whenever the stone-skipping championship concludes. Could be hours, Colton replied with a smile. They're keeping score. Vivian studied her brother's expression. You seem at peace here. When you first mentioned buying this property, I thought you were crazy. It was Liam's idea. Actually, Colton explained. Last year during therapy, Dr. Washington asked if there were any places he still feared. He mentioned this cabin. When I suggested we visit it together to overcome that fear, he countered with, what if we bought it and made it ours instead? Out of the mouths of babes, Vivian murmured, impressed. He's been involved in every step of the renovation, Colton continued. Choosing materials, designing spaces. The upstairs room, where Hawthorne had him, Liam decided it should become a library filled with books about truth, science, and real-world exploration. His way of replacing false narratives with genuine knowledge. A splash and burst of laughter drew their attention to the lake, where Liam had apparently fallen in during an ambitious stone throw. Instead of being upset, he was floating on his back, calling for Emma to join him. Should we tell them lunch is ready? Reuben asked. Let them play a bit longer, Colton replied. Some moments are too perfect to interrupt. Later that evening, as fireflies began emerging around the property, Colton and Liam sat on the dock, feet dangling above the water. The day's activities had left everyone pleasantly exhausted, with Reuben and Sophia preparing to drive home while Vivian read in the screen porch. Dad, Liam broke their comfortable silence, his expression thoughtful in the fading light. Do you think people can really change? The question, unexpectedly philosophical from an 11-year-old, didn't entirely surprise Colton. Liam had always possessed depth beyond his years, partly natural temperament, and partly the result of processing complex experiences early in life. I think people can change aspects of themselves, Colton answered carefully. Behaviors, attitudes, even values sometimes. But fundamental character, that usually just becomes more clearly revealed over time, rather than truly changing. Liam nodded, processing this. I was thinking about Mom. And Dr. Hawthorne. Colton waited, giving his son space to continue at his own pace. Mom seems different now. In our visits, she listens more. Doesn't try to tell me what to think. Liam trailed his fingers through the water. But sometimes I wonder if she's really changed or just learned to hide things better. The insight was startlingly perceptive. That's a sophisticated question, Colton acknowledged. What do you think? I think. Liam hesitated. I think she's sorry she got caught and lost everything. But I'm not sure she really understands why what she did was wrong. Not deep down. That's possibly true, Colton agreed, honoring his son's perception rather than sugarcoating reality. Sometimes people regret consequences without truly regretting actions. Like when I was little and would say sorry for taking cookies just to avoid getting in trouble, not because I actually thought taking cookies was wrong, Liam suggested with a flicker of his usual humor. Something like that, Colton smiled, though the stakes were a bit higher. Liam grew serious again. Do you hate her? For what she tried to do to me? To us? The question had come up before in various forms over the years. Colton's answer had evolved as Liam matured, always honest but age-appropriate. I don't hate her, he said truthfully. I'm still angry sometimes about the choices she made, especially how they affected you. But hate requires emotional energy I'd rather invest elsewhere. In you, in our life, in the family we've built. Liam nodded, seemingly satisfied. I don't hate her either, but I don't trust her. Dr. AITA says that's healthy, that trust is earned through consistent actions over time, not just apologies. Dr. AITA is very wise, Colton agreed. They sat in companionable silence as darkness settled over the lake. In the distance, a loon called hauntingly across the water. I'm glad we made this place ours, Liam said finally. Before, it was just the scary cabin in my nightmares. Now it's where we skip stones and have cookouts, and where Emma pushed Uncle Reuben into the lake when he wasn't looking. Colton laughed at the memory from earlier that day. That's the power of restoration, buddy. Taking something damaged or frightening and giving it new life without erasing its history. Acknowledging what happened, but not being defined by it. Liam leaned against his father's shoulder, comfortable in the growing darkness. Kind of like us, right? We went through the scary stuff, but built something better afterward. Exactly like us, Colton confirmed, wrapping an arm around his son's shoulders. Exactly like us. The final chapter of their restoration story unfolded 3 years later, when Liam turned 14. The lanky teenager who now stood eye to eye with Colton had retained his thoughtful nature while developing new confidence through competitive swimming and an emerging talent for architectural drawing that made his father quietly proud. Hawthorne had been denied parole at his first hearing, his continued justification of his protocols demonstrating a lack of remorse that concerned the board. Bridget had gradually rebuilt a life teaching psychology at a community college in Tennessee, far from clinical practice and under permanent license restriction that prohibited work with minors. On a cool April morning, Colton and Liam stood together outside the Durham County Courthouse where the custody battle had played out 9 years earlier. Today's proceeding was different. The final review of the supervised visitation order that had governed Bridget's contact with Liam throughout his childhood. At 14, Liam now had legal standing to express preferences regarding visitation. He had requested this hearing himself, with Dr. Washington's support, ready to establish parameters for his relationship with Bridget as he entered adolescence. Nervous, Colton asked as they waited for Vivian to join them. Liam shook his head. Not really. I've thought about this a lot. Dr. Eliza and I have discussed all the options. And you're sure about your decision? Yes, Liam replied with the quiet certainty that characterized his approach to important matters. It feels right. Inside the courtroom, not Judge Hargrove's this time. As she had retired 2 years prior, Bridget waited with her attorney. At 47, she maintained her professional appearance, though the years had softened her features somewhat. When Liam entered, her expression brightened with genuine warmth that still contained an undercurrent of calculation Colton recognized from long experience. Judge Whitaker, a younger woman with a reputation for thoughtful consideration in family matters, reviewed the case history briefly before addressing Liam directly. Young man, I understand you've requested this hearing to express your preferences regarding the visitation arrangement with your mother. You're now of an age where the court gives significant weight to your wishes, though final determination remains with the court. Would you like to share your thoughts? Liam stood, his posture straight but relaxed. Yes, Your Honor. I've been thinking about this carefully. For the past 9 years, I've had supervised visits with my mother. As I'm getting older, I believe it's appropriate to adjust that arrangement. Bridget leaned forward slightly, hope evident in her expression. I'm requesting that supervision continue, Liam continued clearly, but with modified parameters. I like the flexibility to have visits in public settings like restaurants or parks, rather than only in the Family Service Center. I'm also requesting permission to text or email directly with my mother, with the understanding that my father would have access to our communications until I turned 16. Judge Whitaker nodded thoughtfully. You're not requesting unsupervised visitation at this time? No, Your Honor, Liam replied with remarkable poise. I value my relationship with my mother, but I also recognize the history that led to the supervised arrangement. I believe the modified structure I'm suggesting provides appropriate boundaries, while allowing our relationship to develop more naturally as I grow older. The measured response, neither rejecting Bridget nor ignoring the past, reflected Liam's remarkable emotional intelligence and the years of therapeutic support that had helped him process the complex dynamics of his family situation. Bridget's attorney stood. Your Honor, Dr. Wade appreciates her son's thoughtful approach and supports his requested modifications. However, we would propose consideration of a transition to unsupervised visitation beginning at age 16 rather than leaving that determination for a future hearing. Judge Whitaker turned to Liam. Would you like to respond to that suggestion? Liam nodded. I'm open to discussing unsupervised visitation when I turn 16, Your Honor, but I prefer that determination be made based on how things develop over the next 2 years rather than deciding now. The wisdom of this approach, taking things step by step rather than making premature commitments, impressed everyone in the courtroom, including Bridget, whose expression reflected a complex mixture of pride and regret. After hearing brief statements from both Colton and Bridget, Judge Whitaker issued her ruling. The court finds Liam Wade's proposed modifications both reasonable and developmentally appropriate. Supervised visitation will continue with the expanded parameters he suggested, including communication via text and email with parental monitoring until age 16. At that time, the parties may petition for reconsideration of the supervision requirement if circumstances warrant. As the hearing concluded, Bridget approached Liam, maintaining the appropriate distance established by years of supervised interaction. "Thank you," she said simply, "for still wanting a relationship. Many children in your position wouldn't." Liam regarded her steadily. "I've learned that people are complicated, Mom. What happened when I was little was wrong, but it doesn't have to define everything about a relationship forever. That's what restoration means, acknowledging damage without being limited by it." The sophisticated insight clearly caught Bridget off guard. Her clinical assessment gave way to genuine emotion as she recognized the extraordinary young man her son had become, not through her manipulative protocols, but despite them, through Colton's patient guidance and Liam's own remarkable resilience. "You've grown into an exceptional person, Liam," she said, her usual calculation temporarily absent. "I wish I could take credit, but we both know who deserves that." Her glance toward Colton contained a complexity of acknowledgement that had never before been present. Not friendship, certainly not warmth, but perhaps the beginning of genuine respect. Outside the courthouse, as Vivian discussed procedural details with the court liaison, Liam and Colton stood in the spring sunshine. The architectural lines of the historic building caught Liam's attention, and he pulled out his sketchbook, quickly capturing the distinctive cornice detail. "Thinking about restoration work for that section?" Colton asked, recognizing the focus in his son's expression. "The weather parts tell the building's real story," Liam replied, his pencil moving confidently across the page. "Strip those away, and you lose the history. But ignore them completely, and the whole structure eventually fails." The metaphor required no explanation between them. 9 years after the custody battle that had nearly destroyed their relationship, father and son stood on solid ground, not by erasing the difficult history, but by acknowledging it, learning from it, and building something stronger as a result. As they walked toward the car, Liam tucked his sketchbook away and glanced back at the courthouse one last time. "We're going to be okay, aren't we, Dad?" "We already are." It wasn't a question that required answering, but Colton responded anyway, his hand resting briefly on his son's shoulder. "Better than okay, Liam. We've built something that lasts." Around them, the city continued its bustle, unaware of the quiet victory being celebrated by a father and son who had faced extraordinary challenges and emerged intact, not unchanged. Restoration never returned things to their original state, but strengthened in the places where damage had once threatened to destroy them completely. The dangerous man that Bridget and Hawthorne had tried to create in Liam's perception had never materialized. Instead, standing in that courthouse square was a father who had moved mountains to protect his son, and a young man whose mind remained his own. The most important restoration project of all. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.